Good evening, everyone. The Durham Public Schools Board of Education work session is now in session. At this time, we wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to inform our parents, staff, constituents about the work aligned with our mission to embrace, educate, and empower every student to innovate, serve, and lead. Tonight, the administration will be presenting information to keep you up to date on our strategic plan. The interpreters for tonight are Martha Romo Aguirrez and Consuelo Norden. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. Our second item on our agenda is a moment of silence. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. The third item on our agenda is the agenda review and approval.
I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
I'd like to add an item.
Okay. What would you like to add?
I'd like to add an item to, to Operations Services for a mass mandate vote.
A mask mandate vote
Correct.
or discussion or just a vote?
Let's say an action item for discussion and vote.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a motion. Would you accept the motion to add the mass mandate discussion and vote?
Yes.
Is there a second for that? A re-second?
Second.
Okay. So the agenda has been proposed. An amendment has been proposed for the agenda for, you said 9B, to add mass mandate discussion and vote. That is an action item. It's been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
I'm
Oh,
sorry, I had a little question.
further-
Mr. Raven, is
discussion.
there information from the administration that you're bringing, or is this board discussion?
This is board discussion.
And I don't mean to overly complicate it, but could we perhaps do this as 6F early in the agenda, or is the preference to keep it at 9B?
Well, 6F is consent.
Yeah, it can't be 6, you're right.
Do we want to add bump everything down here, make 7, make it early? Is that what you're asking? Can we make it
Just a
early
suggestion.
or removing it?
Yeah, I'm open to adding it whenever anyone feels appropriate. I don't think the timing matters, but I also don't have any background materials from our staff at this time unless Chair Umstead does.
If we'd like to alter the amendment, we'd need a subsidiary motion to amend. And it sounds like it would be a subsidiary motion to amend the amendment to present the action at an earlier time in the agenda.
Okay, he withdraws that request. So the motion that has been, the motion that is on the floor and that has been seconded is to add a mask mandate vote and or discussion and vote to 9B on the agenda. That was that's what's on the floor. All in favor, say, what was there?
But the motion on the floor is whether to amend the agenda, and then we'll need a vote on the agenda itself. So there'll be 2 motions before us. We first have to vote on whether we're going to amend the agenda, and then we'll vote on the agenda itself.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is the amendment to the agenda to place the mask mandate discussion and vote at 6B. Wait a second, let me just make sure of this, because it was, the motion to approve the agenda was moved and seconded before the addition of
But-
it.
but
So
the
do we need to
amendment
clear
that-
out do we need to clear out the motion first?
We don't, because the motion to amend takes precedence.
Okay, all right.
And I believe the motion was not to 6B, but was to
Oh.
9B.
Yeah, 9B. So that motion's on the floor. All in favor?
Can I ask just a point of discussion? So, I'll be supporting amending and having any discussion that folks want to have. I do prefer not to surprise our administrators, our superintendent and staff with amendments that they are not aware of ahead of time. And so I think best practices going forward would make sure that folks are aware that items are coming and that fellow board members are aware. I think it's a better practice for this board going forward. Thank you.
Okay, noted. Again, the motion on the floor is to amend the agenda. And then we'll do a subsequent motion and vote to approve the agenda. The motion on the floor is to add mass mandate discussion and vote to 9B on our agenda. It's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? The motion to amend the agenda has been approved. Now I'll accept the motion to approve the agenda as amended.
That motion has been made and seconded already before the amendment, so that still stands. So all I think we need at this time is the vote.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded that we approve the agenda as amended. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Same sign. Passes unanimously. All right. Next item on our agenda is the approval of the board work session minutes. Dated February 10th, 2022.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we approve the board work session minutes dated February 10th, 2022. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please use the same sign. Passes unanimously. Next item on our agenda is general public comment. We have 2 in-person public comments and 144 online public comments. As with policy, we have 30 minutes for public comment. So we'll give 3 minutes each to the 2 in person, and then we'll figure out how do we read? Is it the first minute? To get through as many as we can, doing the first minute of I'm sorry,
That's 30 seconds.
30 seconds to try to get through. All right, we'll do the 30-second version. All right, so the first is Umberto Trejo, and then Carmen Beltran.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Everybody know me, Humberto Trejo. I'm part of the Foro de Padres. And first of all, thank you because you guys use a mask for the child. I love that because the child is the future. Thank you. I speak in Spanish too, okay? Estoy aquí porque me preocupa mucho lo que está pasando en algunas escuelas.
Excuse me, one second. Yeah. So if you can come over to the microphone when you speak, that way everyone can hear what you're saying. I'm sorry. Shirley.
Me preocupa mucho lo que está pasando en algunas escuelas conforme a las personas de seguridad, a los sheriff. Okay. Hemos estado siendo atacados un poco.
I just want to say that I'm worried about what is going on in the schools, especially about the sheriff, that we have been attacked by them.
Los padres no nos estamos sintiendo seguros en acompañar a nuestros hijos a diferentes escuelas, ¿verdad? Porque nos hemos sentido acosados, nos hemos sentido intimidados en ciertas maneras, porque nos están haciendo unas preguntas que no deberían de hacer y lo estamos mirando, nos estamos sintiendo como que están actuando con un perfil que no deberían usar.
I'm afraid, and as another parents also, when we go to school and take our kids there, the sheriffs ask questions that are really intimidating to us, and I think that they is under profile that they are talking to us.
Entonces yo les pido de favor a todos los que están aquí, no sé qué tanto poder tengan ustedes, señor superintendente, no sé qué tanto pueda llegar a usted a hacer. Necesitamos de su ayuda, necesitamos que se solucione este problema porque queremos estarnos sintiendo seguros y queremos estar trabajando junto con las escuelas. No queremos que nos hagan hacia un lado.
And I don't know what is the power that you, superintendent, have, or you can help us that way. We want to be included in this matter, so that's what I ask for help.
Así que les encargo mucho. Somos una comunidad y valemos demasiado. Y esta comunidad queremos trabajar junto con las escuelas. No queremos que nos hagan a un lado y no queremos que haya un puente de por medio. Si esto tiene solución, por favor, ayúdenos.
We are a Latino community and we are together. We want to be included in what you're doing. So please don't reject our hopes and don't reject our request. Just we want to work together with you.
Y nuevamente les agradezco mucho por usar las máscaras. Me preocupan mucho los niños, ¿verdad? Y no tengo nada más que decir, más que les agradezco mucho.
Once again, thank you so much for wearing the mask. We are worried about the kids. I don't have anything else to say, and I'm very grateful with you tonight.
Thank you. And then Carmen Beltran.
Ok, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Carmen Beltrán. Estoy aquí por la preocupación de los autobuses de las escuelas. Tengo una niña en la Brockden Middle School. Seguido se ve el problema con los autobuses. Cambian muy seguido del número de bus, entonces los niños no están como... bueno, ellos están esperando el autobús, pero he visto que los niños en la comunidad donde yo estoy pierden el autobús porque esperan su bus y mandan otro. Entonces siempre es el mismo problema.
Hello, everybody. My name is Carmen Beltran, and I'm just here to say that I'm worried about the school bus situation. I have a daughter actually, and I just want to say that I don't understand how do you do that because the number of the bus changed, and so many kids, they miss the bus stop because they don't know what number is, or sometimes they just skip it, and I don't know what to do about that.
Otro problema también que he visto mucho en esa escuela es la falta de maestros. Hay muchos maestros que han estado renunciando y ponen a suplentes, lo cual es un problema para los niños porque se desvían de sus clases, bajan mucho sus grados porque ellos están aprendiendo una cosa y cuando apenas la están agarrando, cambian de maestro, les ponen un suplente.
Another problem that I have seen in Brown community schools is that there are a lot of teachers who are resigning. That is a lot of problem for the kids because they are just start learning something and they are catching up with what they are learning, and then they just forgot because the teacher has been changed.
También me preocupa que no les hayan regresado todavía sus lockers a los niños, porque esas mochilas pesan como 20, 30 libras. Es mucho peso para ellos. Mi niña es muy delgadita, muy flaquita y sufre de dolor de la espalda continuamente por el peso de las mochilas.
Also, I want to say that I'm worried about the lockers, why they haven't been assigned yet. Those school bags, oh my God, are really heavy. It's around 20 or 30 pounds. And my kid is very thin and she is suffering now for back pain.
Eso es todo. Muchas gracias.
That would be it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we will do, I think, 25 minutes of public comment. That's about 30. We're gonna get through as many as we can, doing 30 seconds at a time. Is that okay with you, Mr. Sutterth?
Absolutely. Just let me set a timer for myself because when I'm reading, I can't keep track of how long I'm going. 30 seconds for each comment.
30 seconds.
We have 144 comments that are all on the DPS website, even as we speak, and have been sent to the board in advance. Our first comment is from David Bradway. Please work to expand the size and number of slots for the after-school care programs at all DPS schools, particularly schools that had later bell times before the recent change, like EK Poe. I suspect with the earlier school day, the before-school care program can be reduced in size, but the after-school demand will certainly grow. Thank you for the work you do, David Bradway. Next comment is from Emily Ellis. A vote on masks needs to urgently be revisited. It appears the board is out of touch with what's actually happening in our schools. The enforcement of the rules in the various schools and athletic events has been inequitable. Administrators, faculty, and staff routinely remove masks or wear them improperly, and yet require students to wear them all day with hardly any breaks. I'm happy to share specific examples privately. There are hardly enough COVID cases to even warrant daily emails. Let's bring some logic to the mask rules. The healthy person does not need to mask. At-risk individuals can choose to mask. Sick individuals should stay home. In addition, asking our overworked teachers and administrators to be the mask police is an insulting use of their time. Just let them teach. Next comment is from Rachel Torcaso. I respectfully implore you to lift the mask mandate in DPS schools and buses as it has been widely shared and accepted now to do so. Holding tightly to this will prove to be detrimental. Your actions now speak for what matters to the board most, the voices of the parents that are the loudest or the voices of those that can't be heard because they aren't significantly the majority. If you took a survey of every parent in DPS with 100% completion rate, I know you would have a better idea of what is best for our kids. Please listen to the counties and school boards around you. Even Chapel Hill is rescinding, and they had a plan in place should local mandates be dropped. I'm disappointed in the board's lack of care and leadership here in this important matter. At what cost will you continue to fight against what is right? I'm a firm believer in being able to get along, even though you might not agree, and I truly want the leadership of the board to put aside any personal opinion. Please lift the masks and make it optional for our students. It is not uniform anymore. We can do this safely. Thank you for your time and your action on behalf of all DPS students. Ms. Smith, is the 30-second timer working? Please, thank you. Next is Rebecca Olson. Are we going to be revisiting masks in school in light of the county lifting its mandate? Also, are we going to be allowed as parents into the school? We would love to see our child's classroom and aftercare. Next is Tammy Andrews. Please do not delay voting on making masks optional for our DPS kids. Wake, Vance, Person, Johnston, Lee, Chatham, Guilford, Franklin are all mask optional. They are in the high category but have moved forward. Local colleges are going mask optional March 7th. NCDHHS recommends schools move to voluntary masking March 7th. The governor encourages all school boards to lift mask mandates March 7th. COVID metrics are declining and vaccinations are increasing. The city and county of Durham will end mask mandates March 7th. Please do not wait until the end of March. Let parents decide if their kids wear masks or not. Next is Jennifer Kiga. As a DPS employee and parent, I'm concerned about the new bell schedule. My biggest concern is that my husband and I both work at an elementary school. We need to be able to get our 4 children on the bus and or to daycare and be at work by 7 a.m. next year. Will they be holding before school for elementary? As it stands right now, I will need to get my children up by 5:45 a.m. each day to be able to make it everywhere we need to be with this new schedule. How will you support your DPS employees and parents for this new change? Next comment is from Amanda Abrams. I very strongly encourage the board to find a way to increase the budget for after-school programming. My son is a 3rd grader at EK Poe, and if we've been able to manage work and childcare so far because of Poe's late-ish end time. But there won't be any way for both of us parents to get our work done if our son's day ends at 2:15. After school has a great reputation, and we're determined to try and sign up early in order to get a slot for 2022-23. But we've heard it's very competitive. It would make all the difference if there were more slots available so that many more kids could be accommodated. Thank you very much. Next is Rachel Torcaso. Even the chief medical officer at Duke University has said there's plenty of transmission around, Pickett said, but I think we do seem to have achieved a place where people can make choices for themselves. Next comment is anonymous. It is way past the time to make masks optional for DPS students and faculty. Durham is removing the indoor mask mandate on March 7th, and the positive test rate is under 5%. More importantly, children are not at risk for being seriously harmed by COVID. I read all 75 pages of comments from the last meeting on 2/24 and see many parents are worried about not having vaccines for children under 5 years old yet and want to wait. Well, guess what? Vaccines are showing only 12% effective on kids aged 5 to 12. Vaccines for babies are not showing high enough immunity markers and have been pushed back. Next comment is from Katie DeGraff. Given the decision to shift all elementary start times to 7:45, my questions revolve around the concrete actions needed to both retain faculty and staff who will no longer be able to make it to school on time, given daycare needs for young children on this short notice. Many daycare and preschool contracts are signed in January. And what are the plans to dramatically grow after-school programs to address what will now be an even larger strain on a program that was already short on space for students? Our family is just one of many that was able to go without aftercare with a 3:45 release time. The next comment is from Jennifer Perry. It is time to unmask our kids. Give the families a choice. If individuals do not feel comfortable unmasking, then by all means, they can still send their children with a mask on. But our children return to a normal life. Every city and county around us had emergency meetings and decided to let individuals have a choice. We should have had the masks removed as of the last board meeting. It's a shame that public opinion was not even considered, and more than likely you are not even reading this. It was asked multiple times why our children were still wearing masks on the playground, and that was not even acknowledged. Please do the right thing. Next is Heather Fahey. Hello, I'm a mom of 3. My youngest is 3 years old and not yet school age. He does not have access to the COVID vaccine or the antiviral or infusions that are available treatments for adults. Please protect him by maintaining the mask mandate while indoors until all children can be vaccinated. Further, please create a plan for removing masks and other safeguards based on science and not politics. Similarly, we need a plan for initiating these safeguards based on community level statistics. Next is Morgan Rutherford. Please consider unmasking our children, especially outdoors. Most school systems in North Carolina, including nearby Wake County and Guilford County, have masks optional. At a minimum, please allow the children to take them off during recess. Next is Parker Reeves. I've been in favor of masks in our schools since our child started kindergarten this year. However, I think the time has come to make them optional in our public schools. It makes no sense that a child can go anywhere in Durham with no mask, but when they go to school, they need to put one on. If a new COVID variant arrives, then we can reconsider making masks mandatory, but it's time to give our children the same option to go mask-free that we allow adults in public spaces. Next is R. From the very beginning, I've been horrified by the very thought of adults breathing what they know could be COVID droplets into the faces of defenseless children whom they know are not eligible for vaccines. Though I must acknowledge that, as many of us know, countless adults violate mask mandates countless times every day. The burning question of mind of everyone who cares is, what is your plan to protect the 3 to 4-year-olds in DPS? Are you going to keep a mask mandate for their teachers? Are you going to seal them off in their own preschool bubbles? What is your plan to protect 3 to 4-year-olds in DPS? Next is Ashley Crabtree. Almost 2 weeks ago, Governor Roy Cooper encouraged local governments and school districts to end mask mandates statewide. Surrounding counties and cities have also ended mask mandates. With Durham City and County suspending their mandates on Monday, March 7th, I assume DPS will also be suspending their mandate. I personally will no longer require my child to wear a mask as of Monday the 7th. I feel we have been very cooperative and very patient, and enough is enough. This issue needs to be addressed now and not put off any longer. Next is Mary McKee. Please lift the mask mandate and make it optional. The rest of the country is doing it, and now it's our turn. It has become political, which was evident at the last meeting. As a board, you are failing our students, and we will hold you responsible. Please do not make us the next viral sensation. No more masks. Next is Laura Sloan. As a parent and new employee with DPS, I would like to know what measures are being taken to provide more availability in the school-based after-school programs. Dismissal at 2:15 will continue to be a challenge to parents of elementary students. This challenge will likely increase with the change in bell schedule, as the demand will likely grow. This school year, many after-school programs were full and on a wait list within days of opening. This is unacceptable. Next comment is from Anonymous. Please make Eastway Elementary a site for summer learning. My kiddos are eager to return for the experience. Next is Sarah. Dear Board, as an elementary school parent at a school that now starts at 9:15, I was very upset at the lack of discussion by the board of all aspects of the bell change will have for the district. While in theory, I agree that the start times may be best in the morning, what was failed to be fairly considered is how a huge segment of young children will now need aftercare, which was relatively non-existent this year due to staff shortages at DPS locations, as well as others in the community. How do you expect working families to be able to pick up kids at 2:15? Will there be enough buses for families that choose to start afternoon busing? Next comment is from Kristen Heary. I have been grateful for DPS's mask mandate thus far, but I believe the board should revisit it. At the very least, children should be allowed to remove masks when outside. Our school does not, and it is excessively cautious and onerous at this point. The science does not back up the need for masking outside. The NCDHHS doesn't require it, nor the CDC. I would be happy to have all masking optional, like many of our neighboring communities, but at the very least, let our kids run around outside without them. Next is Kate Vroom. Please follow the CDC and state guidelines and make face masks optional. Next is Nancy. Give parents the right to do what is best for their children. Make masks optional. Next is Emily Nash. Masks need to be made optional at this point. I was very disappointed in the last school board meeting. I felt like all of you skirted over the issue with the mask, not even a discussion. Next comment is Neil Wills. Drop the mask mandate for our most precious children. Next comment is from Miranda Freeman. Thank you for continuing to protect our children and families by requiring masks in schools. Families with young unvaccinated children continue to struggle with the loss of childcare due to COVID, and keeping their older siblings healthy is so important. Also, children who are immunocompromised or have family members who are remain at risk, and masks are a small price to pay to help keep them safe. We appreciate your caution. Next is Lauren DeBiase. Apologies, ma'am. Please revisit the mask requirement for outdoors. The data show that outdoor transmission without masks and without even physically distancing is virtually non-existent. Given the continuing trend of lower incidence of cases in our community, it is time to lift this requirement. It is detrimental to students' mental health to continue to have silent lunch. The reality is that there really has never been a need for masking outdoors. Please lift this archaic requirement immediately. Next is Kiosha Joyce. Please continue requiring masks for our students and teachers until the vaccination rates are higher. Thank you for thinking of our students and staff and keeping them safe. Next is Michael DeBerry. Please continue to require staff and students to be masked. Next is Sarah May. Since Durham County and City, along with other counties, are lifting the mask mandate, the school system needs to follow suit. Make masks optional in school. Thank you. Following that is Chris Snell. I continue to fully support the mask requirement for all students and staff. Please continue to listen to the CDC guidance, which still recommends masks while in an indoor space. Next is Amanda Sublet. Having been an educator since 1993, I appreciate your willingness to keep the teachers and children safe. However, I have been a preschool teacher since 2001. It is difficult, if not impossible, to teach diction, letter sounds, and many other things while wearing masks to preschool children. We continue to follow safety precautions of cleaning our rooms, spraying down toys and other solid objects, hand washing every 45 minutes to an hour. We are ready to see the smiles on our children without the masks on. Next is Jolene. We know most kids aren't wearing the type of mask that actually helps prevent the spread of COVID. The mask mandate isn't preventing much at this point. Let it be optional, and the folks who want to mask do so, and hopefully they'll use quality masks. Next is Rachel Torcaso. Durham is at 3.16 positivity rate as of March 4th, medium level transmission. CDC does not actively recommend masks indoors as a part of this category. What more science and data is needed here? Making masks optional does not mean parents can't send kids into school with masks on. It just gives parents the freedom to make the best health choice for their children and their family. Since we are seeing better numbers, why can't we see this lived out here in Durham? I'm disappointed that we have come to this now. Please be logical. Please listen. Give us the choice. Next comment is from Tammy Wells Angerer. Please continue to base DPS masking policy on the current infection rates in our community rather than the shouting voices of a few. We appreciate your votes to protect our children and DPS employees. Next is Carmen Nikki Lowe. Drop the mask mandate. The county has dropped it. We have vaccines and need to get back to some sort of normal. I work in healthcare and understand trying to keep everyone safe. I haven't received an exposure call in months, so I assume DSA is COVID-free at this point since I have 2 kids in 2 different grades there. Next brief comment from Nancy is make masks optional. Following comment is Jennifer Perry. We are pretty much the last district to require masks. Even the charter schools have lifted the mandates in Durham. You are going off the NCDHHS, and that has not been updated since January. I ask that you leave the decision up to families and remove the mandate. Next comment is from Fran C. Time to make masks optional. Durham has gone from high to medium. Stop using our kids for your control issues. Next is None, anonymous. I listened to the information about the time shift for our schools. I'm worried about early college, high school, and other specialty schools. Some students have 9 a.m. classes on the college campus and need time to arrive, eat breakfast without rushing, and making it across a large college campus to class. Getting to school at 9 a.m. will not allow students the required time. What is the expected arrival time? Currently, some students have 20 minutes, which is not always enough time. As much as transportation tries, at times buses will be late, and therefore students will end up late to 9 a.m. classes, which will put them behind. Please think of early college, high school. Next comment is from Samantha Abel. The board exists to bring current issues to the table and discuss them in an appropriate and respectful manner. This was not the case at the last board meeting. As a parent, I felt extremely disrespected and unheard by the publicly selected people who should be hearing all sides of a decision. The choice for mask mandates should be reviewed, discussed, and re-voted on ASAP. Between the county mandates that were lifted, as well as all other school boards in our area, it is absolutely shameful that you are still requiring the least affected population to be controlled by your government policies. If you truly cared about what is best for our children. Next comment is from Shannon Berry. Medical decisions are not up to a school board, it is up to the parent. The governor and mayor have lifted the mandates. They are now optional and no longer in place legally. You are not empowered to enforce this, and my child will no longer wear a mask to school. Choice is for the parent, not a school board. Next comment is from Gabrielle Tiffin. Hello, I'm asking you all to consider extending the mask mandate. I know there are a lot of vocal folks on the other side, but as a teacher, I feel that keeping masks on in school is one extra thing we can do to ensure all students are staying safe, especially since the CDC is still recommending universal masking in K-12 schools, regardless of vaccination status or county state mandates. I know we all crave normalcy, and I know it seems so close. My fear is if we remove mask mandates, our cases could start to rise again, potentially resulting in more kids out sick or more classroom closures. Next comment is from Rachel Torcaso. Our mayor agrees. Even though the wearing of masks will not be required after midnight on Monday, March 7th, Mayor O'Neill urged kindness during this time of transition. Although the mandate will be lifted, it's still okay to wear a mask if it makes you feel more comfortable in public settings. This move simply allows people to make their own choice. Dealing with this pandemic has been hard for everyone. Now's the time to be kind to each other, O'Neill said. Next is a brief comment from an anonymous parent. Let the people choose. Following that is our 2 comments from Andrew Gearman. Our children and the people of Durham no longer need to wear masks. A special meeting needs to take place and end this ridiculous practice immediately, not wait until the 10th. The state has already rolled back and all the surrounding areas have as well. Your control is over and we need to get back to regular life. If the elderly Congress can be mask-free at the State of the Union, our less vulnerable children are fine. End the mask mandate immediately. With the end of the state of emergency in Durham County in North Carolina, what legal ability do you have to continue to make our kids wear masks? You are not allowed. Next comment is from Vanessa Safey. Masks should continue to be worn in school until we see how community spread responds to the municipal mask mandates being rolled back. Next comment is from Mary Williams. I would like to see more elementary schools move to the community schools model than Lakewood and Club Boulevard. Parents have not been able to go inside their schools and volunteer the past few years. I would love for my base school to be more community involved. Next comment is from Rebecca Gibson. The reason we are still struggling through this pandemic is that people refuse to take public health measures seriously. One of my own neighbors told me recently that his grandson in the Durham Public Schools has been given some kind of permission to not wear a mask while his classmates do. This child and his family also refuse to be vaccinated. The only thing protecting the other children in his class, the only thing protecting all their families is the fact that all the other kids do mask. When the masks come off, the kids will get sick. When the kids get sick, their parents get sick. Next is another anonymous message. I'm looking forward to the science-based discussion that the board will no doubt have on the DPS mask mandate, during which I trust they will consider input from the CDC and the Durham County Health Department. I'm particularly interested in hearing discussion on how science supports vaccinated children remaining masked during outdoor recess. On the flip side, I am very unenthusiastic for a discussion based on, quoting Chip's recent voice message, community input, because that sounds like a sneaky way to say the Board of Education is afraid to follow science when masks have become politicized, and they are pretending that the mask mandate is being continued. Next comment is from Dorit Price. I'm writing to request that you continue the mask mandate until we are in a low transmission or we have a significant increase in vaccination rates among children and a vaccine for children under 5 years old. The CDC still says we have high transmission, even if we're medium on the new categorization, and the potential for spread of COVID throughout our schools, which will impact students, their families, and already overburdened staff. We also know that communities of color have been disproportionately impacted, which is very important in Durham, just as it is throughout our country, and that people of color are more likely to be in favor of mask mandates to protect their families. Next comment is from Kelly Conklin. Our family is fully vaccinated, and given the current status of the county, I believe that schools should be the first to unmask. Unfortunately, it is the other way around. It's time, especially for our kids. A more safe way to do this is to possibly implement a week after year-round spring break or whatever schedule the particular school is on, to ensure that if families did travel, then they would have a week to see if COVID rates increase because of that travel. Thank you for your consideration, and thank you for all the work you do. Next brief comment is from Rebecca Lee. Please continue the mask mandate in our schools. We still have young children who are not eligible to be vaccinated and need to keep them safe. We have about 3 minutes and 30 seconds left. Next comment is from Travis Fisher. Based on increasingly available science and health data related to the need for masks in schools, it would seem now is the time to remove the mandate so parents can make decisions for their families. Those staff and students who wish to continue wearing masks should by all means do so to protect themselves to their comfort level. As parents, we deserve the right to choose and not be mandated. We complied when necessary, but the data and experts say mandates are no longer needed. I shudder to believe the DPS board feels they have more data and science at their disposal than that of the state and federal governments. We deserve to know before votes why and how the board came to its decision. Next is from Kimberly Salmon. May I respectfully request that the school board immediately move from requiring masks to be worn in and out of schools to mask optional. The COVID cases updates have shown very few cases reported across the entire school system for quite a while. Last week, reported cases ranged from 2 to 8 across the entire district. The week before, they ranged from 3 to 13. The original intention of wearing masks was not to get us to 0 cases of this virus. It was to manage and minimize. It appears we have reached that point, and it is more harmful than beneficial now. Next comment is from Christy Tackett. I am a teacher with DPS. All surrounding counties have taken masks out of the school. I teach little ones. I feel that it is time to allow these little ones to see smiles. Next is Anonymous. Please bring back and place more emphasis on school wellness and the district's wellness policy. The effects of COVID have proven how important improved health, mental and physical, is in fighting and preventing many diseases and disorders. Effective school-based school health advisory councils and wellness teams or committees are an essential piece to establishing well-being in schools for students and staff. The next comment is from Lindsay Stevenson. Duke University has lifted mandates. Durham County has lifted mandates. I work in the Division of Pediatrics at Duke, and the doctors are even questioning why. I'm sure everyone watched the Duke-UNC game on Saturday that was held in Durham. Thousands of people shoulder to shoulder and no masks. Surely our classrooms can handle a significantly smaller population. The county is no longer in at a high level, and even the numbers that DPS themselves are sending out have been at 0 across the board, with the exception of 1 or 2 cases at 1 or 2 schools. Even the CDC has said they shouldn't be mandated. The next brief comment is from Kayla Roberts. Please move us to masks optional. We have 1 minute remaining in public comment. From Carla Roberts, please make masks optional for our students and teachers. Thank you. Next comment is from John Dylan Roberts. You need to get these kids and teachers out of masks. The teachers need them off to be able to instruct the students properly and also to have a productive day. Instead of telling the students to pull their masks up all day, they should be telling them how to do a math problem. The kids need to see faces and expressions to grow psychologically, furthermore, to become normal in the social aspect of their adolescent lives. I hope you consider these words and the many words of teachers and parents in the Durham Public School system. They all deserve the freedom that the Constitution writes for us. Thank you very much. And our last public comment is from Jessica McClellan. Now that the city mask mandate has been lifted, it is time to follow suit and give us the option of unmasking our children at school. They have suffered enough and need to have some sense of normalcy. Enough is enough. It should be up to the parents if they continue masking at school or not. We're doing more psychological damage to them than we will ever realize by continuing to mask when it is no longer needful. That brings us to the end of our 30-minute public comment period. All of the remaining public comments are posted in full at the DPS website.
Thank you, Mr. Suttereth. Please enjoy a well-deserved drink of water. All right, the next item on our agenda is the consent items. We have 5. It's the 2022-2023 school year E-rate application. It's a data protection, backup and restore hardware purchase. There's elementary school F construction materials and testing. Special inspections contract, building services, preferred brands list, proposed, and then the proposed 22-23 specialty calendars. I will say that these are reviewed by the board and their committees with the administration and put on consent based on those conversations. Let's say.
Would move approval of the items on the consent agenda, items A through E.
Second.
It's been moved and probably seconded that we approve all of the consent items. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please use the same sign. Passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, item 7, Chief of Staff, update on references to homelessness in policies. Ms. Giovanni.
Thank you. In my review and working with the Growing Together group, one of the policies that came before me was policy 4125, homeless students. At that time, I felt that it could benefit from a review by the equity department. And I then requested that Dr. Bullock review the same with his department. At this time, Dr. Bullock is here with us, and he is going to share what that review revealed and what some of the suggested policy changes are for this policy and others in your manual. Dr. Bullock?
All right. Good evening, Board of Education, Dr. Mubinga, DPS community. As Chief of Staff Giovanni has said, in light of policy 1900, which expresses the need to utilize people first language, the Office of Equity Affairs has developed some draft revisions of several policies that previously referred to homeless students. So the language has been updated to read students experiencing homelessness or similar wording. So as opposed to referring to students as homeless students, we're centering the person and saying students experiencing homelessness. These revisions include about 100 changes, approximately 100 changes to language about students experiencing homelessness in 8 different policies. We also modified references to the homeless liaison to read McKinney-Vento liaison. The majority of these changes can be seen in the aforementioned policy 4125. And now we have revised even the title of that policy again to read students experiencing homelessness. We also consulted with our McKinney-Vento coordinator, Ms. Ross, and she was excited about and had already been utilizing this new language and very much in support of the change. I want to thank Ms. Giovanni for raising the need to make this change with our office. And I also want to thank Mr. Jermaine Porter, our Equity Leadership and Strategy Coordinator, for his efforts to revise the policies. So we present these policies this evening for a first reading.
Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Ms. Valdez?
Thank you so much for this work. I have just a comment of gratitude and also in discussions with community members. McKinney-Vento is not known. It's something that I know we provide in a lot of, I looked at all our DPS websites. Some schools have shared links, so props to those schools that share links to that. But not all our schools share that language. And so when it comes to McKinney-Vento per se, I think if we could just make sure that it's out there so that families are aware, because terminology matters. And in this case, it also means that families could have access if they themselves, see understand more of what's available to them, right? And so that's just one of the things, because I did have conversations with families who were saying, we've never heard of McKinney-Vento. What are you talking about? What is that? And then once I started explaining, they're like, well, how come we didn't know about this? How come this is not more visible? And I think I had a conversation about this actually going back with admins. So I really appreciate admins engaging on this and the ways that we are providing support. So that's just one thing in terms of all our schools somewhat having links to something, or because I've seen it on some of the school websites.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Oh, I wanted to just appreciate this effort. Thank you. I didn't know you were ready to make a motion. Thank you, Ms. Giovanni, for recognizing the need to update this language. This language matters. And it's important to see it all throughout all of these policies. That I want to make clear that since this is first reading, if community members and board members see other issues within it that need to be updated, what's mostly changed is just that language so far, just the reference to students experiencing homelessness.
Yes.
So if there are other improvements and suggestions that we have and communities members have, that'd be great to catch those before we finally approve those. But I really appreciate y'all catching this and improving this. And I'll bring that work to the Homeless Services Advisory Committee that I sit on, and hope that they can also bring better language to the folks in our community that are experiencing. Thank you so much for this equity focus.
Mr. Sayers?
I would move that we add this to our agenda for March 24th on consent for second reading and approval.
Second.
Been moved and properly seconded that we move this item for second reading on consent for our March 24th meeting. And that's properly seconded as well. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please use the same sign. It passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you both. Next item on our agenda is academic services, Arts in Our Schools Month proclamation, and then strategic plan priority 3 update.
Good evening. Mr. Lee, members of the board, Dr. Mabinga, have 2 exciting items this evening. The first is our Arts Proclamation. Happy to see Dr. Debbie Pittman, Assistant Superintendent for Specialized Services, and Mr. Jeremy Tucker, Director of Arts Education in Durham Public Schools. He is here so that we can introduce our proclamation to be read by our board, as March is Arts and Education Month. Mr. Tucker.
Good evening, Dr. Mabinga, Chair Umstead, and DPS Board of Education. Arts education is one of the shining lights of Durham Public Schools. Across DPS, schools are beginning to host their spring musicals, visual art exhibitions in the community, which will display exceptional student work and teacher work. Spring instrumental and vocal concerts are also being held, and dance, piano, and guitar recitals will be performed finally in person, if I might say. District-wide, we will host all-county band concert tomorrow evening, elementary chorus concerts and orchestra, as well as visual art shows out in the community at South Point Mall, and even a teacher art exhibition at the Durham Arts Council. These are just some of the activities and ways that we are celebrating Arts in Our Schools Month, an annual celebration originally proclaimed by the U.S. Department of Education that showcases the accomplishments of students in dance, music, theater arts, and visual arts nationwide. Additionally, and this is really exciting, In lieu of this year's Evening to Shine, DPS Arts Education has partnered with the DPS Foundation to present DPS Fest, a community fun fair, next Saturday, March 19th, outdoors at Durham Central Park. We will showcase more than 20 schools performing on multiple stages beginning at 1:30. We would love to invite each of you to attend, our Board of Education here, as well as the community at large, to engage with us. March is a month, as Dr. Hardy mentioned, dedicated to arts education and gives our students, teachers, and key decision makers a chance to appreciate how important arts are in our schools. The arts not only allow them to express themselves, but also reinforces what students must learn in other subjects across the curriculum. Our students need access to arts much more now than they ever did before. DPS celebrates the importance and the value of arts education during every month, but especially during March. Arts education has truly shown the power of change in all of our students' lives and is the key to learning in a post-COVID-19 world. DPS continues to build on its well-earned reputation as a state leader in arts education, hitting records for participation in all disciplines, including dance, music, theater arts, and visual arts. DPS also continues to work towards universal access to arts education. Our school administrators, each of our school board members, our community partners, and teachers are all working in unison to ensure that we provide both inspiration as well as the infrastructure to ensure participation by all students. Chair Umstead, I yield to you and members of the Board of Education to read this year's Arts in Our Schools Month proclamation.
All right, thank you for that. Absolutely. So as we generally do, we take one line at a time. Mr. Sears, would you mind starting? And we'll just kind of go, guess it's counterclockwise around.
Got it. Proclamation. Arts in Our Schools Month. Whereas all students have the right to an arts education that includes dance, media arts, music, theater, and visual arts taught by certified arts educators in partnership with community providers. And
whereas arts education has the power to change students' lives, and
whereas arts education is a key to reigniting students' learning in a post-COVID-19 world, and
whereas arts education helps nurture healthy, inclusive communities where all points of view are respected, and
whereas arts education experiences help students understand their own cultural roots and appreciate others' cultural roots and traditions, and
whereas arts education supports the social and emotional well-being of students and fosters a more positive, safer school environment, and
whereas arts education is part of the well-rounded education for every student as outlined in the Every Student Succeeds Act and in state law.
therefore, be it resolved that the Durham Public Schools Board of Education pledges to maintain and grow arts education programs, as well as proclaims March 1st through 31st, 2022 as Arts in Our Schools Month, and asks all to celebrate the importance of arts in our students' lives. Signed the 10th day of March, 2022.
all right, let's approve it.
Move approval? Second?
It's been moved and properly seconded that we approve the proclamation, Arts in Our Schools Month. Any further discussion? All in
Yeah.
favor? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you all for this proclamation. We have amazing talent in Durham Public Schools. One of our amazing educators is retiring soon, Mr. Tab, and he has spent so much time developing the arts at Hillside. So I just want to say thank you all for this. I can't wait for the community fair. I hope other people come because they can also see what amazing gifts and talents our students have and how they're being cultivated in our schools. So thank you.
Any other discussion or comments? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please use the same sign. It passes unanimously. Thank you.
Next, we have a strategic plan update. We're always excited to provide an update to our board and our community. At this meeting, we are providing an update regarding priority 3 to attract and retain outstanding educators and staff. Dr. Alvira Lassane, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources.
Good evening, Dr. Mbinga, members of the board. It is my pleasure today, along with my team, to be able to share with you updates for our strategic priority 3. And so while we're pulling up the first slide for priority 3, our efforts to attain and attract and retain outstanding educators and staff, I would like to also say that as part of our presentation, I have here Ms. Kimberly Hager, who is our Senior Executive Director in Human Resources, as well as Mr. Jeffrey Coweek, who is another Senior Executive Director who will be presenting on their particular goals. We can go to the next slide. Okay, this is just an overview of all of our priorities. You hear these updates and you know how all of these work together. And so this is only one slice of the pie, but it is important to view it in the context of all of our priorities. Okay, the next slide. Under strategic priority 3, we have 3 main areas that we focus on in this priority, and we use these to highlight what we're doing with our work. Goal 3A focuses on our turnover rate, and we have an overall goal of 14.3% for our strategic plan. 3B focuses on our educators of Hispanic or Latino descent, and we seek to get to 10% for this goal. And then goal 3C focuses on our employment satisfaction survey. This began with the actual development of that survey, and then making sure that based on that baseline that we are able to get to at least 85% satisfaction rate. So if we'll go to the next slide. I do want to take an opportunity at this time to just publicly thank Mary Jane Palmer, who recently retired. She was the lead for this particular goal and did an outstanding job. This metric right here, as you can see, while we made great strides and had great celebrations last year, this time of the Great Resignation has definitely had its impact on our turnover rate. And so as we stand right now for this year, we are looking at 18.7%. This is calculated on a monthly basis with the assistance of Alex Modestu in our finance department. And so we keep an eye on this metric, and it is going in the wrong direction for us right now. In talking with colleagues and looking at other districts across the state, I would say that we have nothing that's outstanding with this metric that is not going on all across the state of North Carolina. So while we realize that, we want to do all that we can to mitigate this metric. On the next slide, you can see some of the strategies that are designed to help address this goal, including teacher compensation, and looking at how do we onboard our employees? How are we mentoring them and helping them find a home within Durham Public Schools? Also, what are our partnerships? How are we collaborating with our colleges and universities, as well as other community organizations, to help draw individuals not only to DPS, but to help them want to stay, as well as our work with other stakeholder groups to improve our working conditions? Okay, if you go to the next slide. You will see here that even though we've seen an increase in the turnover rate, we still have met our goal for the past 2 out of 3 years. We've met this goal. We have also increased support for our licensure pathways. One of the things that we'll talk about a little more is even the transition of our partnership with CCTI and other unique ways that we are trying to make sure that we have opportunities for our employees. Obviously, our opportunities rest with the current recruitment challenges that we're seeing all across not only our state, but across the nation. And I think we can still do a better job of understanding the why teachers are staying and why teachers are leaving. We are putting a tremendous amount of effort into improving compensation, but we also know that there are some other drivers that we can do as an organization to help make sure that we retain staff. On the next slide, you can just see some of the reasons in our conversations with staff. There are things that are beyond our control, as well as things that are within our control. And so we will continue to focus on what does that beginning teacher support look like in particular. Our school leadership support, professional learning and growth opportunities, as well as HR and licensure support. All of those are things within our realm that really do not cost significant money that we can do to help build within our to help reduce our turnover rate. On the next slide, you can see some of the key actions that we are taking with this goal. And so I want to take a minute just to go over some of them. We actually work individually with schools on their individual data and see what's going on. When we have particular schools that maybe have a higher turnover rate, we need to dig into the why for that information. We market the overall satisfaction rate for our beginning teacher program, and we are proud to say that satisfaction rate with our beginning teacher support program is at 94%. We work on ensuring compliance with evaluation timelines to make sure that our employees are getting that feedback. We have our new CCTI partnership that we are in with Wake, as well as just Durham as we transition to that. TA to teachers, as well as our teacher supplement increases. And we continue to work on providing that additional compensation. In progress, we continue to look for ways to expand our wellness opportunities for our staff. We have an outstanding EAP provider, and we want to make sure that our employees know all of the benefits that they have access to through our EAP support services. We continue to work on other things, other ways that we can utilize our beginning teacher support to help ambassador folks into Durham Public Schools. We have increased opportunities for mentoring and coaching of pre-service teachers. And particularly, we're looking for new ways to celebrate our teachers, okay? We have, like, for instance, I personally serve on the licensure committee for Pepsi, and we use that leverage to try to advocate for licensure policies that will help us better recruit across the state of North Carolina, and particularly here in Durham. We still have a lot of work to do around with our school administrators to ensure effective use of TWC data and feedback. How can we turn that around into actual strategies in our building, as well as we've had a lot of additional meetings with our schools of education to come up with additional ways that they can support with us. And so we're looking for additional partnership opportunities there, as well as gaining more insight into those reasons why. And yes, Mr. Reagan?
Just a quick question. Can you give a breakdown of what some of those acronyms stand for? I know some of them, but not all, like CCTI and TWC.
Okay, thank you. You know, as educators, we often forget that. And so CCTI is the Central Carolina Teaching Initiative. That is an alternative pathway to licensure. EAP is our Employee Assistance Program. Okay, let's see, what else do we? BT, Beginning Teacher. TWC is the Teacher Working Conditions Survey. Okay, I think that covers our acronyms on that. Thank you. Next slide, please. And so at this point in time, I would like to turn it over to Ms. Hager to discuss Goal 3B.
Good afternoon, board members, Dr. Mabinga, colleagues. When we look at this slide, we are still increasing in our percentage of Hispanic Latino new hires despite the pandemic and current recruitment challenges. Next slide, please. We are continuing to strengthen our existing partnerships and establishing new ones as well for the ongoing work of recruiting educators and staff who identify as Hispanic Latino, as well as scaling up our Grow Our Own programs in collaboration with our HSIs. Next slide. Last year's, we saw an increase of a 0.9 percentage point. This year, only a 0.2%. And we still experience an increase despite the pandemic challenges. We want to review and accelerate our current practices and efforts, as well as identifying new ways. Next slide. Here are our areas of promise. We want to highlight these. First, our TA to Teachers program, our largest cohort to date, here's a net, started this past fall with 3 Latino candidates. We acknowledge that while there are like strategies across employment types, we also must customize our efforts to recruit across the spectrum from classified to administrative ranks. Again, we also just need to take the extra initiative to capture the stories of our existing staff. Why did you choose DPS? Why do you stay? Why do you think we need to recruit others? Also, we just need to take we want to nurture our relationships with our university partners. We are currently in conversation to work on the vision for our dream partnership with UNC Chapel Hill to include an administrative arm with the Latinx focus. Next slide. We want to highlight that we still want to provide professional development opportunities for administrators and department leaders to ensure the focus not only on considering Latinx candidates, but including Latinx teachers and staff in the hiring process when filling school and department vacancies. Ongoing nurturing of partnerships with a focus on the Latinx community. Next slide. Yep, this one's yours.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Mubenga, DPS community. My name is Jeff Coek, and I'm here to talk about 3C, priority 3, which is to attract and retain outstanding educators and staff. My responsibility in this goal is primarily with the employee engagement survey. We work hand in hand with Dr. Spencer and her team in research and accountability. As you can see, when the strategic plan was started, we had in terms of response to the employee satisfaction survey, as Dr. Lassane mentioned, we're trying to get to over 85%, as you can see from the data on this slide. So far, even last year, when the survey was sent out in the time when staff members were returning to school, we've still been meeting our deadlines. The employee engagement survey goes out in conjunction with the teacher workers condition survey in the month of March. So that data will be coming after this month. It was just sent out last week, and so the data is coming in. Next slide, please. All right, in this slide, the strategies that are here, the first strategy that in the strategic plan was about the fair and competitive compensation. Dr. Lassane will be talking with you more about that this evening. But the second strategy about working with supervisors and administrators, staff advisory groups, and other stakeholders to enhance and improve staff working conditions. This is sort of an ongoing process. I'm also very excited about one of the sort of shifts that we're focusing on this year. We have added questions to the employee engagement survey specifically to elicit responses from our classified staff about professional development opportunities that they feel it would be helpful for them to either improve their performance and knowledge in their current jobs, but also as training opportunities for potential advancement within DPS. I've assembled a team, which I think is a great one. We've got Principal Rasconi, we've got Joe Harris in transportation, we've got Anya Zeidman in IT, and we have Darnell Massey in the Office of Professional Learning. And the idea is to start looking at that data as we end up our strategic plan about what sort of internal staff development we can do for our employees to help foster a good work environment and a place that everyone can say that DPS is a great place to work and grow in. And finally, we are keeping in mind both the drivers of why employees may feel satisfied within Durham Public School. You can see the list on the left. Certainly, the board, Dr. Mabenga, has spearheaded lots of compensation bonuses. We certainly feel the accessibility of board members and district leadership to employee concerns is another positive aspect that comes through. There are some barriers. Some of the barriers are changes that we've had to make as a district. Certainly, we've seen that ending remote work is not necessarily favored by many employees, and we're working through that so we can staff our schools, so we can protect student safety and student learning as best as possible. So we're constantly balancing those two things, but we're hopeful that this year's survey will give us the best participation rates ever. And results are already coming in. I'll just give one small shout out to Community Ed Department. In less than a week, they're already over 70% who have responded. So that's our goal for 3C.
We'll give just a minute for review of that slide as we're preparing to go to the next section. One of the key pieces of priority 3 work centers around our work with the recruitment plan. If we can go to the next slide. When we talk about recruitment and engagement opportunities, these are a huge focus of our work. So we have key categories that are built into our recruitment plan that involve identifying our critical needs and hard to recruit areas, as well as recruitment engagement opportunities, our marketing and advertising, our specific focus on Hispanic and Latinx recruitment, celebrations and incentives, as well as personalized onboarding. So if we can move to the next slide. In identifying our critical areas, you can see a number identified on the next slide. These are our areas of key focus. You can see all things exceptional children, elementary teachers, math and science teachers, bus drivers, and bus monitors. Now, I will tell you for the next slide, I had a request from a board member to be able to look at some specific vacancy rates. And they gave me permission for the information to be rough. So these are some rough percentages. And I do know that finance was looking at this also and shared some additional pieces with me that I'll bring up in just a minute. But as you can see here, we do have high vacancy rates for our EC teachers, EC instructional assistants, elementary teachers, math teachers, science teachers, bus drivers, and bus monitors. At certain times, this can be difficult to monitor. Finance has shared with me that they think that our EC numbers are high here. So I'm gonna go back and compare notes with what they have, and I will clarify if there are discrepancies in those amounts.
Dr. Hussain, are these percentages of the entire EC workforce? Like, how are you seeing these percentages?
So when you're calculating vacancy rate, you have to look at your total number of positions. You look at what you have filled, okay? And then your percentage is based on that. So if you have 20% of your positions that are vacant, then that's your vacancy.
So if there were, for instance, 100 EC teachers in Durham Public Schools and we had 23 vacancies, that's
Right.
the way you would get that.
That's what the
percentage.
vacancy rate is.
Thank you. And concerning on several fronts. Thank you.
Absolutely. And so I do want to check because, like I said, on the EC teachers, we may have some duplicates in there. And so we're just going to go back and look at that together. But keep in mind that with position control, that is how we try to monitor our vacancies. So sometimes when you're trying to figure it, the way our data comes in, if you have the same position that's been filled multiple times and you don't catch that duplicate, it can impact your data. So we're just going to double check those for you. But I did want to share that data with you. Okay, on the next slide. Some other background work that I shared with the board. We had to go in, there is not a way to actually go to DPI's website. You can pull information on your percentage of Latinx students from the state website. You cannot do that for employees. If we can go back one slide, please. And so what we are in the process of doing that we have not fully completed, we have shared some preliminary information with you, is we were actually able to go in and identify the largest districts with the greatest percentage of Latinx students. And so you have a document that has those districts identified, and we are working with them individually to try to get the percentage of staff members that they have. Based on the comparisons we had thus far, we are very much pleased with the progress that we have made in Durham Public Schools. We are the second out of those, second highest employer out of the districts that we have been able to identify thus far. We have 2 more districts that have reported since you received your board materials, and we are still the second. One of the things that that process has also taught us is we have looked specifically at what is the balance of certified as administrative and classified positions within those ranks. And we still show pretty well among the school districts. And so I did want to at least give you that preliminary information, and we're going to continue to work on completing that to drive our metrics as we not only look to complete this strategic plan cycle, but also going into the next one. Let's go to the next slide. So to talk a little more about our specific recruitment efforts, Ms. Hager is going to come back and speak to you.
Next slide, please. So we have ongoing partnerships with several of our international teaching agencies, including Educational Partners International, Global Teaching Partners, and Participate Learning. These partnerships provide opportunities to recruit both virtual and in person. And all of our partners have committed to prioritizing DPS in our efforts to increase the number of bilingual educators and staff in our district, with an emphasis on teachers from Spanish-speaking countries, including Colombia and Honduras. One of our partners right now is currently in Honduras recruiting on our behalf. We currently have 101 international teachers from countries around the world, including Jamaica, Colombia, the Philippines, Honduras, and Zimbabwe. Our international teachers are licensed in elementary education, math, science, Spanish, and dual language. Next slide, please. This year, we launched our 3rd cohort of the TA to Teacher program in collaboration with North Carolina Central University. We have 30 instructional assistants who are on track to become teachers within the next 2 years here in our district. They're studying elementary education, special education, and middle grades. We are currently exploring other opportunities to grow our own from our very own DPS high school students who are considering careers in education. Not only are we recruiting for teachers, we're planning hiring and events for our operational services departments. We have events planned for our bus drivers, as well as our before and after school staff and substitute teachers. Next slide. Next slide. One more. Next slide, please. Thank you. Marketing is key. HR is working in collaboration with our Office of Public Affairs to ensure a strategic plan for advertising employment opportunities, both internally and externally. We're also exploring different ways of advertising and marketing this year, given this challenging recruitment season, thinking outside of the box. Next slide, please. And then one more. Thank you. We are having ongoing dialogue with key stakeholders and community partners to ensure that we're utilizing the best avenues in spreading the word about employment opportunities with DPS. We want to eliminate any barriers. What are we doing different? Meeting people where they are, hosting pop-up events at local businesses with plans to attend street fairs and festivals. Next slide. One more. Perfect. Finally, we are launching, it's hard to breathe behind this mask. Finally, we are launching a DPS Ambassadors Program for schools and departments, as well as producing a recruitment video, which will showcase all of the wonderful attributes of DPS. We want to provide candidates and our new hires a personalized onboarding experience to DPS. Finally, we want to be both thoughtful and intentional about how we welcome all of our new hires to the district. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you. Thank you. That was the last one.
With the personalized onboarding, induction, and mentoring, you can see the different items here. Our mentoring program is one of our gold standards. I'm just going to tell you, when we go out and recruit and when we look at the offerings of other school districts, that is a huge piece. We have also recently had newer meetings. I think we have a new director at El Centro. And so when we look at some of our partners that we are utilizing in the community, we also look at using those networks to help build our communities of support, even around our Latinx PLN. We actually had a meeting yesterday with the group and talking about some of the activities that we can have planned for the remainder of this year for that group, as well as making sure that all of our employees have an ambassador at their site that will help bring them and usher them into the DPS culture. And so at this point in time, with that just quick update on a lot of the things that we have going on, we are glad to entertain any questions that you have regarding the web of information that we have shared.
Board members, are there any questions or comments related to strategic plan, the priority 2, or is it 3?
3.
Priority 3. Ms. Byer.
Thank you all. I want to thank you all for this important update. There's a lot of great work going on. You all are juggling a lot. And I'm more alarmed than I've been in a long time about our people. There's a reason we set that as a strategic goal. And we can call the pandemic to blame for a lot of it, the labor market that's shifting around us. But what keeps me awake at night is wondering who will be our teacher pipeline, our educator pipeline, our bus driver, our custodian, our cafeteria workers, our team of people that choose to work in this beloved work. This is why our teachers were rallying. This is why there are petitions. And I wonder urgently kind of what we can do in the shorter term to get some supports in place that feel like they're not there. So do you all need more staff in HR to move applications through sooner? Do we need more people to help speed background checks along? Like, what human resources can we bear? Do we need, like we talked about previously, to have a dedicated pool of subs in Durham, perhaps some recent retirees that would come back and be available within the school communities and would have benefits and you know, the work that we were talking about doing through a temp agency, but we could do within Durham Public Schools.
I don't have answers, I have questions. Another question is, within the Latinx statistics, what percentage of those are educators and what percentage are custodial staff and bus drivers? Like, what's the real breakdown of that goal? Because that one is audacious for a reason. We know that representation matters. We know that it matters to get educators in front of our students that look like them. So if you have anything on that one, I'd really appreciate kind of some more clarity on that breakdown within.
Okay,
staff.
so I want to address several parts. Yes, substitutes, where our pipeline, we're all having the same conversations. I even had a conversation with a comparable school district today that is actually looking at that very thing on substitute teachers. I've seen more and more districts going towards looking at those support agencies to assist with filling their subs, just to even get their sub rates that are very much like ours in the 30-some% range to even try to get them back up to 50%. And so that definitely is a challenge. Regarding specifically what you're saying about the Hispanic and Latinx piece, that is one thing that I've truly been pushing for, is to be able to look at that, because I think we can have a metric like 10%, just to be very transparent, and it have unintended with that balance between classified and certified. So we do have that information from those area districts, and so I can break that down for you and share it with you. I would say that in the breakdown of that data, DPS still looks pretty favorable, but we still have work to do. And I would like to see more of a balance between that. And that is showing in our recruitment efforts and the activities that we have planned.
So have you all talked about, like we've talked about it in the past and we've never gotten anywhere, but like a bonus for staff that are bilingual, like that as a metric of saying this is what we value. Has that come up in your strategic planning as well?
That has not come up in our strategic planning, because even though compensation is a huge thing, I would have to be able to, number one, identify all of our bilingual staff, how that actually fits into the role of what they're doing. We're not opposed to providing any information, but we haven't had any indicators that would be like a driving force for increasing this metric significantly.
Actually, saying, if you're saying that this goal, that our teacher turnover this year is already above 18%, where are you all projecting that we could end this school year? And if I'm reading that statistic, it's a rolling statistic that is growing. It's not.
I think our ending metric is probably going to be somewhere around 20, if I had to project.
Are you getting exit survey data from folks that gives us anything qualitative? Are you getting information, Dr. Mubinga, at your teacher advisory council when you're talking with folks in person? Is there anything that we could do urgently to address folks this year and folks staying through the remainder of the year?
Thank you, Ms. Bayer. I'm going to let Dr. Lessen respond to that specific exit data, which we are collecting already, but I would like just to make a general comment. I just came from a conference last week where I was a panelist with our community college partners, president as well. This labor market is really brutal to all of us. My colleagues, they have pretty much the same data that we have. When you look at job market now, we have a millennial, they're pretty much occupying about 50% of the markets nowadays. And it's gonna get worse. And I have data that I'll be sharing with you via PowerPoints whenever I get a few minutes here. So what we're doing here, we're doing everything possible to really recruit. But I'm not surprised with the data that we have. As much as positive we like to be, this is not a Durham problem. This is a nation problem. Everybody's facing the same problem. If you just look around us, where you have some of these private companies that's moving, they're paying really well.
That's the reason why we're trying to bring this recommendation to our county commissioners, as well as do the salary study for our remaining staff. The market is getting really brutal, and I'm afraid, I don't want to be pessimistic here, it's going to get worse. We don't have a lot of these colleges that are really preparing teachers. So this problem is really nationwide, and our staff, we are doing everything possible. Can we do more? Yes. We are even start looking at our graduate, our students that are at the middle college. How can we get those students to be able to pay for their 2 years so that we can bring them back and give us a good 4 or 5 years? Teachers are not there. When we're talking about our classified employees, you're paying 15, 16, while other places are paying 20. It's hard. It's hard. To be direct to the question of Ms. Bayer, what can we do immediately to try to stop this bleeding? I think compensation will be one thing that we can fix quickly. If we're paying everybody $20 an hour, would attract some folks. We did it with some of our contact tracers. When we had about $18, we got it to 20. We're able to recruit few, not all of them. So it's really hard. I know compensation can solve a lot of these problems. And we are also working with our supervisors, our principals, how they need to create those working environments so that folks will stay. We're going to continue working on that. We're not perfect. There are some of our employees that are leaving us. They'll complain about the supervisors. Those are the things that's on an ongoing basis we are really addressing.
So with regards to the exit surveys, we are constantly scrubbing exit surveys. And as we have responses that are not aligned to what we would want to receive, I know I do it personally. I know Mr. Coweek in particular does it personally. We reach out to individuals. When I receive an administrative recommendation just for my particular area, I make a personal phone call to that person and just try to speak with them. And one of the things that I always share is, as Dr. Mbinga was sharing about just kind of the nature of millennials and what we know, you know, people will leave and transition jobs. The key is, will they come back? Were the working conditions such that they did not leave with a bad taste about our organization? And so we try to follow up on any of those responses on the exit surveys. Anything that becomes a red flag, we want to make a personal touch with that individual to see if they're willing to speak with us and be able to share additional information. So we are constantly looking at what comes in on that exit data, as well as our HR techs and HR admins, as they're talking with individuals. A lot of times people will share things in emails and all of that. They will forward those if there's anything concerning in those emails and say, just for your information, and we will try to reach out to individuals through that method, even if they have not completed an exit survey.
Maybe Ms. Hager could also speak to the DREAM program a little bit more for folks that might not know what that is. That is exciting. It was exciting to be at the table early on with those discussions. And I think it's important for our community to know the work that you all are doing. I love the idea of the high school cadet program and perhaps partnering with Durham Tech to get kids over there in the future to get their first 2 years. But if you can speak to that, Ms. Hager, I think it's so exciting to share with our community.
Absolutely. Thank you. We have launched the DREAM program in collaboration with UNC Chapel Hill. We just completed the initial interviews with the first cohort. So we're really excited and moving along with that program to coordinate or collaborate with our PACE program that's currently in some of our schools. So we will have about 10 in that first cohort of the DREAM program. So we're really excited and hope that will also help to increase our recruitment efforts of Latino candidates.
All right, Ms. Valladares.
Thank you so much for all the work that you are all doing. And I know that this has been years. Actually, Kim, I remember we've had chats even going back years, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and all the efforts that have been done over years. So this is consistent, right? There's a consistent effort. And so I want to thank you all. I'm very excited also about Dream, Emily Chavez, leading that work. And also, I met some of the cohort participants at the events that we had at the Staff Development Center. That was really exciting. So definitely a lot of excitement with that. I will say that when it comes to recruitment, when it comes to everything that is listed in the presentation, one of the things that I'm most thankful for is not just the aspirational things, but the recognition that we need to go deeper. And I saw in there something that was very promising that said conversations with current staff. And those conversations, I think, are vital. I think we can have the strategies, and we've talked about ideas and big ideas, and those are great. And I'm so grateful that, this presentation is very robust in terms of strategies. But we definitely have to have conversations with, our staff. Some conversations that I've had with some staff just kind of tells us about a climate that sometimes doesn't come in the teacher working conditions survey, because that's DPI, right? There's some standardized questions throughout. But if we actually want to go deeper, I think those focus groups, those conversations about what does it mean to be the only person, the only one in a school building, in a school community of 300, 500, 800, whatever it is. There are schools that don't have adequate staffing when it comes to representation and diversity. To be the only one, and what does that mean? Does it mean that you're pulled out of your, duties to tend to a need that arises in 1 minute's notice? And does it mean that sometimes you are stretched thin and you're doing 5, 6, 7 things? You're answering the phones, you're helping this family here, you're being asked to do more than maybe other staff members are being asked to do because of your linguistic abilities. And so that might lead us to some questions in terms of how do we increase bilingualism as in general. I mean, we are, in a school district that serves a growing population of multilingual children, and we have some language immersion programs, we have some programs like IB, and there's, the nurturing of bilingualism, multiculturalism, all these wonderful things, but we have to really look at what does it mean to not have adequate staffing, and also how to protect, and I'll say protect the joy of people who work in our district, who may be super talented and sometimes being stretched thin in so many ways. So I'm really excited. I really thank you all for the strategies. But again, those conversations might help us have those, professional development with the staff in general. Like how we are aspiring to increase our capacity. I would like to see, and I know that this was a question, we've seen this material before, and we've had a chance to ask questions. And this was a question that I asked previously. And I know, Dr. Lassane, that you mentioned you started with some limitations of what that pattern looks like across schools, but I wanted to see the breakdown by school of where we have Latino, Latine, Latinx, Hispanic. I'm using all three because now Latina is also a term. I'm letting y'all know Latinx is not as popular, but it's popular among some folks. So, so when it comes to representation, to have an adequate picture, if there's a school that has been very intentional about hiring staff, and maybe they have 6 people in that building, maybe they have 10, what are some schools, and are there schools that have 1? How can we keep that in mind in terms of capacity building, and also separate representation from linguistic abilities, because they're not the same thing, and some of us here speak Spanish, some of us don't, right? And so, and that is something that I know that we have trainings, and one of the things that I'm excited is working with the Multilingual Resource Center, which can provide, I guess, access to Durham Tech and getting that certification. So we can, I understand there's some sponsorships of staff that go to Durham Tech to build their linguistic capacities. But I would like to see representation across our schools.
So I will just offer up an answer to that very quickly. Even last year, and we're looking to build on that this year when we had our leadership retreat. That was one of the focus areas that we had in our session for human resources, where we provided each school team their information across a lot of things that are related to the strategic plan, but one specifically spoke to our Hispanic and Latino recruitment, where they could see their numbers for their actual site, but beyond the numbers, they were working on a plan to actually say, this is how we will recruit from our site, because Mangum may look different than Southwest and all of that. And so it was really a conversation built around the culture of that school, where they were, what would their approach would be. And so we will be continuing those conversations.
Gracias.
Beyond we'll have Ms. Lewis, we'll go to Mr. Raven and Ms. Umstead.
Good evening. Thank you for this presentation. Every time we speak about the strategic plan and where we are, it's always robust with information and just different levels of information, different parts. I wish we could have taken questions, but we'd be at each part that you talked about, but we'd be here all night. And I'm going to limit to just one question unless I have a follow-up, because I know my colleagues want to speak as well. Historically, we'll see that Title I schools typically have a higher teacher turnover rate. Is that what's seen in our district? And if so, what exactly are we doing to offer additional support or supplements to the staff in those schools? I know we have, I'm thinking more along the lines of compensation, allotments. I know we have federal funding that helps with those allotments, but is there anything that we're doing locally to give additional support to those schools?
So number one, I would say that is the assumption that Title I schools always have the higher turnover. And that is not, it's not the Title I designation that necessarily denotes that. I would say that you can even see in the data for our schools that it's often more connected to teacher working conditions. So what I can do is try to do a breakdown and be able to share some information with you that may lay that out very clearly. And so I can actually pull that together. As far as Title I supports, I would say that naturally comes in the additional positions that are allotted to Title I schools. So when we talk about all of this, work that hands have to do, Title I schools have additional allotments and additional supports that assist with the work for those environments. So I will ask for some clarity on your question, but that would be my number one answer to that piece.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Raven.
Thank you all for this, because I think what we're all seeing is what's happening outside in the real world and how it's really starting to impact us directly. I think the timing of this was uncanny. They just released that it was not 11.3 million jobs that were created, but they had around 4 million people that actually left the workforce. So you can see that huge gap of where are these people going. The inflation went up like 7.9%. So people are also dealing with not getting raises like they should be compensated. And then the funds that they do have are getting depleted because the cost of everything has gone up. So that's a real fact. The things I'm wondering about is, what is our plan to adjust for next year? For instance, we know right now we're already at a deficit of 1 in 5, on roughly 1 in 5. Do we have any plans of possibly even considering overhiring for the beginning of the next school year? Because the one thing that I have heard from a lot of our teachers, and especially our IAs as well, is coverage, right? And what we're starting to see is there's a certain level of burnout that comes when you have other teammates that are out, someone else has to cover, then you're split between two. It's difficult for you to eat a lunch because you have to help cover another class. So I'm wondering if, at least starting off the year, overhiring, knowing that we are going to have some amount of droppage to help try to balance the scale. Because again, from some of the feedback that I've heard, it's some of the educators don't even feel like they have the time that's dedicated for planning. I know with the teacher work days, my assumption, before being part of the school board, of what a teacher work day looks like, and their accounting of it is completely different, where I know a lot of them want dedicated time for planning, for creating their schedule, for grading. But at some point in time, that is not conducive to sometimes what the administration at a school may feel is needed with professional development or anything else that they're working on. So I just hope that we're able to use some of the feedback that we've received this year to improve the conditions for next year, to hopefully reduce that turnover and hopefully increase our retention rate for next year.
I definitely think that we're going to have to have crucial conversations about efficiencies. To your specific suggestion about overhiring, we haven't had discussion about that. And quite honestly, we have not had discussion about that because we're having a hard enough time filling the positions, that we actually need, much less getting to a point of overhiring. And so I would really have to process that a little more just based on where we are with our basic just positioning with hiring, period.
Thank you.
Ms. Umstead.
I want to thank you all for the presentation. I feel like my colleagues asked a lot of the questions that I was going to ask. But I wonder if there's opportunity for us to bring some teachers to Durham because of our values. Durham is an equity-focused district, and equity is being attacked all across our country. And so I do wonder if in our recruitment tools, as you all are thinking about the marketing, how do we lead with that? As a millennial who likes to work in places, right, that are driven by my values. So I think about that a little bit in those recruitment tools. How can we talk about who we are and how we operate in a way that brings people who want to be educators to our community? I know that I'm gonna pause because it looks like y'all have a response to that part.
So we do. And I want to share a very specific example. We were definitely trying to be efficient with time in the presentation, but Ms. Hager and I just had a meeting along with Chip's team, who is helping us tremendously. And one of those had to do with that personalized piece. So we're looking to have a personalized video that when we're out recruiting, we'll give it and it actually calls that individual by name. And so we were having a meeting with the vendor about what do we want in this video? The vendor is asking us, what is Durham about? And that was the number one thing we talked about. So actually in the design of this video, we're talking about how we take Durham culture and history to brand it, to be able to share this, to recruit those people that have the same values as we do as a district. So I will use that as a specific example of what we're looking at doing differently in this recruitment season, to not only have that personal touch with candidates, but also to highlight this is what we're about. And so if you sign on with us, that's what we're seeking to attract. Okay, would you add something?
Yep, I would just add, Bettina, we are definitely leading with equity as we're training our new recruiters on our team, and what we share about our district, we're leading with equity. So who are we? What is Durham Public Schools about? And that's who we want. We want folks to know that's who we are. And also, Mr. Raven, I wanted to follow up with you as far as thinking about our teachers. We're working with Dr. Soto, Chris Soto. Mary Jane was leading this work before she left, but she was working with Dr. Soto on teacher wellness and teacher support. So thinking about the teachers and staff that we have and thinking about their wellness. So I just wanted to add that. But we're leading with equity.
Thank you all for that. To Mr. Raven's point, I feel like our vacancies also drive some of that conditions that also drive people feeling burnt out. So it's glad to hear that we're working on that. This is a separate topic, but I wonder how with the teachers growing our own program, we can be helping utilize students in some ways to help be supporting in classrooms and different places in the schools. I'm sure there's a much full program that is not displayed tonight because we have a full agenda, but I think that's another opportunity to be considering. How can we help build our own teachers who want to work in Durham and get some of that experience, whether that be, it could be in many of the different areas within our district if students can be interning to help support some of the needs we have.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Just want to comment quickly on the comments of Chair Armstead. So we start doing recruiting some of our students as well, even the area of IT. So they are going to be the future workforce, and we have to do a better job with that. I really wanted to make a general comment here regarding compensation. There are times where my team will come to me and say, can we pay teachers that are teaching students with special needs more. Then you have folks that will come, how about those teachers that are teaching dual language and so forth? And then you make the same argument as well for those who are teaching mathematics at a high school level. Anyone with a bachelor degree in mathematics, they can go start a job easy, $50,000. So it's really complicated to go and differentiate that pay with one particular group. That's why my strategy has been pretty much since I came in. Let's move that supplement across the board. All areas, even a K-5 elementary, it's really tough to recruit now. So if you have to go with one particular group to compensate them more versus the other group, it's going to be a challenge that we're not going to be able to resolve. So let's keep on emphasizing on supplements, moving across the board. I think we're going to be in a better place once we get it funded by our county commissioners, and I will be number one. That's going to be another tool that we'll be able to use.
Thank you, Dr. Mabinga, for that. Also just wanted to add to our educators who sent the list of demands to us. We hear you, we hear you, we hear you. So this board approved approved a bonus for this spring and another one for this fall. There was a early release day that we asked that this be meeting free so teachers can have some of that time back. You can hear us talking about how to support those substitute vacancies and volunteers. We know that a lot of parents have asked about that as well. So we want this to be the place where you come to work and you grow and hopefully retire in this district. So know that we hear you and we're working towards making working conditions better for everyone.
Ms. Fahey.
I am really committed to the work that you are all doing in the sense of acknowledging like all the hard work that goes into it, and also just, you know, just saying what I'm seeing in terms of strategies that we have tried and we will continue to try, but also thinking about that pipeline. It comes back, and the pipeline is Grow Your Own, which we've mentioned, but there's an even more important pipeline. And it's the pipeline of the students that we currently have in DPS who are graduating. Every year when I go, we've gone to so many graduations. And the question is, you know, these children who have access to getting credits from Durham Tech, their associate's degree, you know, do they want to come back and work for us? Do they want to be a part of the school district? And that's why it's so important that that experience, it ties into everything that we do in terms of our equity work. It's with our students, make sure that they feel like this is a place they want to linger. You know, they don't want to just graduate and forget DPS, like that they're still a part. I had the opportunity to talk to an educator who worked for the Charleston County School District, who started a student ambassador program. So it's called the Student Ambassadors, Bridging the Gap. And you can find that video on YouTube. But what's so interesting is that there is definitely a way that students in high school, because we've seen the data about sense of belonging decreasing for some students, were able to lead. They were able to get credit. It's like a course. They're getting their credit towards graduation by being able to use their linguistic abilities, their abilities to connect and help the school district and build that leadership. You know, in many ways, a lot of our students who are bilingual, we passed a resolution that was wonderful in terms of elevating the culture of our students, but similar to a lot of these dual immersion programs that allow students to shine in the ways that they can shine. I think these ambassador programs have been really impactful. And I wonder if our vision for this pipeline can include some of our high school students and develop coursework, develop ways that, you know, they can meet towards graduation, but also it puts them kind of seeing a future career with DPS if they choose to. But we also have to, again, address as many different things in terms of like those surveys, the student surveys, what's happening, ensure that the culture is definitely the culture that is set towards this embracing of multilingualism.
So I would say that there were two, I know, again, we were trying to be efficient, but there were two bullet points in the presentation that I would just like to highlight with regards to that. First of all, I must give a shout out to one of our teachers. This is a brainchild of one of our teachers, Lauren Castine, who is a teacher at Northern High School,
who is working very closely with us on the development of something like a Bull City Teaching Fellows, something along those lines that would be a program for our higher school students that are interested in going into the field of teaching, where we can align their coursework or whatever, have them come out, somehow get them, you know, a scholarship and have them return and be teachers for us right here in Durham Public Schools. Also, Dr. Mubinga is very much committed to helping us develop a program where we can take those students, say for instance, at our middle college that are coming out of Durham Tech, coming out of middle college with that associate's degree from Durham Tech, transition them right into, say, North Carolina Central, and have them come and be teachers for us right here in Durham. So those are two initiatives that we're in the process of developing to help tap into that, grow our own pipeline directly from our high schools.
Are there any other, Ms. Byer?
Thank you. So I had the pleasure of joining some of you all at the Carolina Theater yesterday at the Chamber event, where our dear own Minnie Fort Brown was honored as a 2022 Bull City Hall of Famer. And I so appreciate Minnie's 16 years of service on this board. And she took the opportunity to shout out to that crowd of entrepreneurs to let them know that we need people and that applications are available. She challenged folks to come and teach our young people and walk side by side with them. Dr. Mubinga, we can't afford for this to get worse. It is all out of our control, but you know, we're going to keep rattling and making noise, suing the state if we have to on Leandro again and again and again, right? Because it's the state's inadequacy. But in Durham, we're going to have to continue to figure it out. I would love us to have some conversations with the chamber, with Duke grad students that have a spouse that comes with them, like with our firefighters or part-time city and county employees that might have some flex time to sub, you know, Tuesdays. Like, we have to turn over every leaf within Durham to wrap our arms around our children. And I just look forward to you all continuing to not just think outside the box, but break the box as we're taking care of these children. I know we're going to talk about classification and compensation next. We have to go to the county. There's nowhere else to go. We got to go boldly this year. And I look forward to kind of ways that we can do that while that study is ongoing, because we need people. We need caring, loving people here with our children. But thank you all, and look forward to continuing updates on this really most important strategic goal.
One other real piece that we are working on diligently on several different fronts is even how do we make Durham affordable for people to be able to live here. So one thing that really didn't come out in the presentation that I do want you to know as a board is our efforts at working on housing, helping folks be able to afford a mortgage in Durham. We're working on several partnerships in the background to see if we can get some leverage that will help us meet those needs, so that we won't have people that have to travel an hour in order to be able to live in affordable housing and come work for us on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I would hope that that would also include ongoing conversations with the county about our affordable teacher housing project that has gotten pushed to the back burner and needs to come back to the front. And it includes all of our staff, right? Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you all very much for that update. We really appreciate it. That was for information. Right? Yep. Okay. Moving forward. Next item on our agenda is operational services. Classification and compensation study process overview.
Good evening again. So as we go to the next slide here, I stand before you today just to present some information on our process.
we are to the point that we're ready to launch sharing information with our staff members, and we wanted to talk to you a little bit about the process today. So if we go to the next slide, all efforts around classification and compensation for our employees must focus on these three prongs of a purpose. We have to, number one, make sure that our employees are in the right buckets for the type of work that they're doing. We have to make sure that we're legally compliant with our job descriptions that accurately reflect the roles of individuals in our organizations. And we have to assure that people are compensated at a fair and competitive rate for the work that they are doing. And I might even add for that, we're trying to do that in an ever-changing market, because right now, what is deemed as being fair and competitive is changing. And so on the next slide, this is just research-based. Anytime we're looking at a well-designed and implemented compensation system, it includes all of these things that you can see outlined here. I can tell you that in conversations with staff members and all of the things that, all the information that has come my way around compensation, the three areas that we're going to have to look at the most closely are perceptions around what is internally equitable, perceptions around what is externally competitive, and what is affordable and sustainable for our budgets over time. Next slide, please. So with that being considered for our DPS approach, part of how we want to make this study feasible is we have both an internal and an external component. Our planning and preparation, of course, is internal, but also we have some work to do internally as far as the evaluation of our jobs. Okay, once we complete those job evaluations, then it goes to our vendor for them to do their market survey and analysis and to make recommendations to us about not only salaries, but our processes and different things like that. So if we go to the next slide. Traditionally, when you're conducting job evaluations, there are three different ways to look at it. The first one is via ranking. And that's just where you can compare jobs based on the overall worth of the job in the organization. DPS has never used that method, nor would we be looking to recommend that method. We currently use what is known as the classification method. So we have jobs that are in existing grade and category structures, such as a director or coordinator, or you're on this salary grade band. Each level in the grade or category has a description that should be aligned across the different jobs that are within that category, and an assigned salary schedule that goes with that. A third method is point factoring, which is the rank of jobs using a system based on factors and points. And that is one of the things that we're looking to borrow from that method, which is recognized today as one of the best methods for considering the development of compensation schedules. Next slide, please. So this slide is designed to show what we will be doing internally in our process. Number one, we're going to begin with virtual orientation sessions where we give all employees access to information about what the compensation and classification study will look like. We are gathering all the job descriptions we have. We have some job descriptions, just to be very transparent, that people have been in there for a long time and the job descriptions have not been adjusted for a long time. So if we send dated information to a vendor for consideration, it clearly is going to impact the results that we get back. And so we are looking to make sure every job has a job description that is updated and truly reflects the work that those individuals are doing. So what we will be doing is sending this out where employees can tell us exactly, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm spending my time. This is how much I'm spending on this. We will be able to reconcile that with those job descriptions, have a supervisor review. So an employee just can't tell us something without their supervisor being able to look at it. Once all of that information is submitted to HR, we will actually go through and check that information, look at how bands of employees are compared and all of that. We will share the preliminary results and drafted job descriptions for everyone to review and be able to say yes, or to be able to engage in dialogue before finalizing all of that information. Once we finalize the information, then it goes to our vendor, and the vendor has to do their work doing comparisons, both internally within education as well as externally. Next slide, please. So in the classification review and the information that we're asking employees to give us, there are some factors that we have to consider. We have to consider the scope of accountability for individuals. We have to consider their fiscal accountability. Do they have a budget that they're responsible for? What is their decision-making authority? Do they have individuals that report to them? What is the actual level of education that is required for that job? And you can see, particularly among our classified ranks, what is the safety or personal risk and physical demands that come with those particular jobs? So those are just some factors that you will see on the left-hand side. One thing we need people to remember when you're looking at job evaluation is you're evaluating the job description, not your opinion about the person who's currently in the position. Okay, whether or not you think they're doing a good job or not should not drive that compensation. We're actually looking at what is the function and the role of that job. We evaluate the job based on work normally and regularly required. So you can do a laundry list of everything that comes with the job, but where are you spending the majority of your time versus functions that you may only do one time a year? That has to be able to be recognized in determining compensation. And you evaluate the job based on the minimum requirements, not your ultimate or desirable requirements. Okay, next slide. And so when we're looking at the request for proposal that will go out, we are asking for vendors to submit RFPs that will conduct an employee compensation study of both public as well as private employers. We want to look at the pay grade and structure. We also want to look at any internal or inequities, okay, or external inequities. And we want that vendor to recommend adjustments that we may need to make if they find anything. We have some historical things that we think a vendor may be able to give us some feedback on. We are looking to evaluate all certified and non-certified positions. And we are looking at a comprehensive comparison of jobs of other similar educational, public, and private organizations. So given our proximity to RTP, we know that there are many, universities are a major competitor for us for research positions. So there are all types of jobs like that that have to be considered in this review. We are also asking for vendors to review our policies and practices surrounding compensation and prepare a comparative analysis that makes us truly competitive in our current market as a result of this. Next slide. The final piece that I will share with you on our process is kind of just a timeline. You can see the 3 phases that we have identified in their windows. So the RFP, we're looking to open next week. It will close on April 15th. We are looking to present to the Board of Education on May the 5th. And then we're looking to have everything completed to be shared with the board on December 8th. And so that is the process for our classification and compensation review, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Raven.
Thank you for this. It's definitely well done. My question is going to be, when I look at this, I just have the inclination that it's going to show that our staff needs to be paid more, needs to be compensated more. We don't control our own funding similar to the city and the county. So I'm wondering, would there be any benefit of when the consultant is doing the work to be able to do a comparison for our classified jobs compared to the county? Because if we do this whole compensation study and we see that, so many of these positions are not in alignment, if there's no correlation between what the county is showing, how much their similar staff is getting paid, it's going to be difficult to make that case saying, these people just need to be paid more. Whereas if there is some type of relationship, it's easier to point to the fact that we are appreciative of everything that you all do for us, but we have some inequities that we're trying to address. And we have people that work in your county to do the same job of people that work in our school system, and they're being underpaid by 10, 15, 20%. So if the consultant could at least keep that in mind and understanding what we may end up asking for at the end, it's not a bad idea to be able to have some type of relationship.
Absolutely. And I would say comparisons as far as external comparisons, not only the county, but also the city.
Thank you again.
Anyone else? Any further discussion? All right. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. This is for information as well.
I'm sorry. I
Oh,
thought
okay.
lots of people would have conversation. My concern is how you all are thinking about making these adjustments and the timeline. And especially, we've heard from a lot of our folks that were both excited that bus drivers got moved to 17 an hour, but also felt left out of that, right? We know that's one huge group of our employees that feel an urgent need. Are you all, with this timeline that won't have the work done and presented to this board until December, are you thinking of making pay adjustments retroactively? How is your thinking about how we will start to address a lot of folks' concerns as quickly as possible?
Our process is designed to have the recommendations from our contractor by December the 8th in order to be included in budget preparation for the 2023-24 school year. In our plan, there is no plan for retroactive.
Okay, but also, again, last conversation about the labor market, right? And how comfortable we are with waiting that long for what is kind of a long process when we know the earth has shifted under our people. I saw Dr. Mavinga has an answer.
I'll try to answer. I think the plan that we presented today is for a long term. I just want to make sure not only we're going to be fair to our certified employees as well to our classified, including central office. Last time when we presented our budget, you all know it was about $12.8 million that we're bringing for new ask. I have our CFO here. If it's going to be the pleasure of the board to get some of these classified employees, excluding the bus drivers that they already got to $17, we have a price that we can present to you today. Again, it's the pleasure of the board if you would like for us to include this for our current budget that we'll be presenting to the board. But what Dr. Lassen presented, that's for long term, that is going to be 23 and 24. We are ready with the specific price tag that if you would like for us to include the classified employee, if there is any sense of urgency, we'll be glad to include it today.
The sense of urgency that I think I've been pretty vocal about, so I don't think you need to hear it from me again. I think it's 3.7 million or something the last time I looked at it. 4.4. So at a time when the county was able to actively add $20 million to their fund balance this year, I feel like there may be some room for them to help us with this. I don't think our IAs are going to wait. So that's the urgency I feel.
So roughly that will be pretty much about $17.2 million new ads. So the pleasure of the board.
Anyone else? Thoughts? Matt? Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry. So Dr. Lassane, on this notion of, you've got this slide about classification reviews and factors to consider. Can you help me understand safety and personal risk and hazards? Do we have jobs where we're paying people more for hazardous duties in some way?
So there are some duties that have a greater liability based on because of the physical pieces that are part of that work. And so that is a consideration when you're looking at those jobs, particularly in comparison to other jobs that have similar risk factors.
So electrical work, like tell me what they would be. I'm just trying to
Electrical
understand in
could
our
be
context.
one. Keep in mind when you're talking about electrical, you also have license that are required for that. Look at our conversation about bus drivers. So, you know, there's some risk when you are talking about some of the things related to the bus. And that was some of the justification, even in the conversation about increasing the salary for bus drivers. So when we're looking at certain categories of work, you do have to be able to look at those physical demands and risk factors.
And without giving away RFP details, what are we paying for this sort of study?
Well, they have to submit and tell us how much they would charge to conduct the study. So we'll have to see that when our vendors apply.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lassane. I appreciate that. We will move forward. All right, and so the next item on our agenda is one that was added by amendment, and that was the mass mandate discussion and vote that was added or requested to be added by Mr. Raven. Did you want to start the discussion, Mr. Raven?
Sure. The reason that I wanted to add this to the agenda is we've had a lot that's come on lately. At the end of last month, we voted like we normally do, and we've done this consecutively for the last few months. It was really nothing that changed enough, at least from my perspective. So I felt confident that the rest of the board was probably going to vote the same way. Since that time, we've had a big change of events, not just in Durham, but in the country. We've had the city and the county decide to remove their mandate. We've had the President of the United States do a State of the Union in front of a room full of hundreds of people with no mask on. And while that may be part theater, it's part to make a statement that it's time to get back to how we were. So before I start this whole long drawn out thing, the one thing that I want to say is that when I added this on, I know that we had to talk about it this month. I understand that the community has been reaching out and has been communicating with us through every channel that they could, whether it's social media, emails, text messages, what have you. So from my perspective, yes, we do need to remove the mask mandate. The only question is when, right? Depending on what you want to look at, depending on what piece of data you want to use, it's going to bias your opinion somewhat, just based upon your own perspective. But every single time we've been faced with a difficult situation, we have engaged it. We have come together to make a decision that we believe will continue to move the district forward. Whether it was back in 2020 when we were looking at athletics, should we allow athletics to continue for sports like basketball and wrestling and stuff like that? It was a tough decision. We made it. We used data to make it. We moved forward. When there were metrics around when we should reopen schools, all right? We were dealing with the General Assembly tentatively going to push us forward with it. We were hoping that the governor would veto it, but we, the district, made the decision to open schools ahead of time because we felt that it was coming and we felt that we needed to be prepared. In this situation, everything else has already opened. And even the CDC within the last, I guess, shortly right there before our meeting or right after the meeting, the CDC even changed how they've done it. So some of the things that I've tried to do is I've tried to actually look at the data. But outside of just the data, some of the things that we have to think about, and this is something that I failed myself personally to even mention previously last year when we talked about opening the schools. I remember, and I read all social media, I read all the comments because I like to get people's true perspective on how they feel. One of the comments that I remember reading multiple times is if the school board members wanted to vote to open the schools because they were worried about us potentially losing enrollment in the future, they should have said that. And that was one of my reasons, and I didn't say that at the time. So I'm saying that now. We are having to fight to support public education, right? We are not having to look just at this short-term needs, but we have to make sure that we're also looking at the long-term sustainability of all the programs that we have in the school and ensuring that we're not only looking for the enrollment, we want to be able to provide our students with a well-rounded education. And we also want to make sure that we're providing with them with the environment to have that's conducive to learning. So having the mask optional is not us telling all the families, do not send your kids to school without a mask. It's not saying that. What it's saying is we are acknowledging that we are at the stage of an endemic, which means that the coronavirus is not going anywhere for the foreseeable future. We are having to look at the stats and look at the metrics and see how things have fallen. I know around mid-January, January 16th, we were at close to 1,200 new cases in a day. At this point now, we're somewhere around, what was it? We're at like 79 as of today. So we've seen like a 93% drop in the cases. We then have to think about, we really have to come down to the real life situations of families and what they're dealing with. We always talk about equity, and when we talk about equity, we also need to relay and convey the experiences of the people that write us directly. For instance, if you are one of our families in DPS, roughly 1/8 or 1/7 of all of our families, there are students that receive EC services. So we have 7 board members. I'm one of those parents. So that's part of that 1 in 7. So if you have a child that has been receiving speech therapy for the last 2 years with a mask on, that's a difficult thing to do. And it's going to stifle some of the growth and some of the opportunities of our students. So when we hear parents talk about that, you do have to visualize what they're going through. I think some of the other things that we also need to look at is another piece of equity when we're looking at student athletes, right? We had to advocate for our students to even be able to play sports, and they're still playing, but we're dealing with situations in which other districts don't require masks in their areas. So in another situation, we're potentially capping our student athletes. And if we advocate for them to be able to go without masks to wear that, are we being fair to our other students that are in school? Maybe they're outside on a park. Did they have to wear a mask outside? So my position is to remove the mask. My only point of wanting to have this conversation is to ask ourselves, when is the right time and how soon do we want to do that? Now, I believe that we have to have some open conversation and dialogue from each other to be able to come to an agreement on when that right time is.
Would anyone else like to comment? Ms. Umstead?
I do think the administration has some updates they want to share about masking. From my position, masking reduces the transmission of COVID in our schools. Like, that has been well studied and researched. And so I think in order for a public school system that serves every kid, who has families that are connected with lots of different health elements or not, like it is important for us to think about how we keep our children safe. And so that is the lens that I'm reviewing and kind of considering this through. I think about, we serve mostly Black and Latinx families, and those folks have been disproportionately impacted, unfortunately, by COVID-19. And so I think while I understand that people are ready to take off the mask, I want us to be thinking about how we do this for folks who are the most vulnerable. I do believe if there are challenges with services and other ways, let us consider how we can do that in a safe manner that allows students to get what they need and also allows both the student and the educator to remain safe. So I'm just want to add that out there. Dr. Mabinga, I think you all have some information you want to share as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to preface my comment by saying mask mandate is a decision that needs to be made by our board. It's not a decision that our administration will make. But I would like to come to you tonight to share with you what we would like to recommend when it comes to outdoor facilities as well for our athletics. At least for those two particular areas, you've been able to work with me to give me that authority in the past, and I hope that will continue as well. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Hardy to be able to read some of these guidance that we would like to propose if our board would like to continue giving me that authority so that we can proceed with that. Dr. Hardy.
Thank you, Dr. Mabinga and board members. It's our recommendation that masking is not required when outside the building for such activities as recess, lunch, or other outdoor school activities. Students and staff may remove their mask while outdoors, trying to make sure that they maintain distance whenever possible. With regards to athletics and our spectator capacity at our high schools, each outdoor venue will allow up to 75% of their allotted capacity. And for middle school, each outdoor venue will allow up to 150 spectators based on capacity standards.
Okay. Mr. Sears.
Yep, so I'm really disturbed at, where as a society we are with trusting science and vaccinations. Not a surprise, we've said this before. For the community listening or watching, we follow this stuff every day. And it didn't take a Duke research study to come out yesterday or today for us to know that masking as a part of the Swiss cheese model was working. And we've had community members say, look, our cases are so low, right? The daily report is so low, without finishing the sentence, and masking is a part of that. So this is not to throw stones at certain groups or certain inputs, but the science that's disturbing to me as we make this important decision for our community is that the vaccination rates within children are incredibly low. We've had access for months. I think I heard 40% for 5 to 11-year-olds, 4 out of 10. That says a lot about where we are as a society, trusting vaccinations to help mitigate the worst pandemic in a century. Because of that, because there are 60% of our 5 to 11-year-olds who don't, and we can talk about the efficacy of the vaccination at that level, but these are folks that may be transmitting COVID, that their immune systems are not suppressing it to where they're not spreading the virus as much. We have to consider that as we make this decision. We know there are families that have children that are younger than 5 at home that send their kids to our schools every day. And as Mr. Raven said, the most vulnerable are some of those that we have to consider. That said, I am ready to have the conversation. Administration just gave us their recommendation. I could be in favor of removing the mask mandate for outdoor settings soon. I want to caveat that. And I want us to realize that changes things for our staff, because the second part of that recommendation matters. No longer are they going to be the mask police, they're going to become the distance police. This is not just going to be returning to normal like that. Even though one could argue that there's been plenty of lead time on this with all the other counties, this is Durham, and we respect our fellow citizens, and I want us to have some lead time. For those that are worried about their youngsters, the vulnerable ones in their family, I want them to have at a minimum a few days to do what they need to do to get ready. Maybe that's getting more KN95 masks, communicating with public health officials about where they can do that, securing some testing, waiting for that second round of USPS mailers to arrive. I think mine is arriving on Monday. So I don't want us to do this for tomorrow, Friday. I could be ready for sometime, I'm just talking to my board colleagues, sometime early next week to give our community a few days to get ready. And then similarly, I could be ready if things continue to trend in the same direction. Certainly personally, I would like to see the CDC level rated at low, not medium. I'm not going to stick directly to that, but I think our community needs time, including our teachers, to get ready for an eventual mask lifting. I am not ready to lift masks indoors before spring break, traditional spring break. And in my career work, I'm working on the team at Duke that does surveillance testing. They've lifted masks as well, but not for classrooms. And they have some of the top folks in the world working on their assessment of risk. So we have colleagues in this work. So board members, that's my take on where we are today.
Any other contributions to this discussion? Ms. Byer?
I appreciate it. I appreciate all the communications we've been getting from folks across the community. I appreciate the differences of opinions that folks have and the strong opinions that have been shared. Throughout this pandemic, Durham has approached COVID with care and compassion and caution. And I share a lot of the sentiments that Mr. Sears expressed, that I think it's the outdoor stuff is probably ready and our community's ready for that. I think it will help a lot of the folks that feel that they want to see children having that time to see each other's smiles and faces and emotion conveyed. So, you know, giving folks a little leave time and getting there is a step, I think, in the right direction. Otherwise, let's get past spring break. Let's watch this masking continue to be effective as we know it is. Let's take a little bit more time to be cautious. And I want our folks that are frustrated to know this is not forever. This is a little while longer. And I appreciate everyone's patience as we give that little while longer. I've also got an email into our Durham County Health Director just asking, what are metrics that we'll have in Durham if we ever do need to implement universal masking again? What are those local metrics? What are we watching? Because when we do make this change, we have to do it with the care and compassion that we've brought to this conversation at all times. We have to have children knowing that it is an effective strategy. Our adults have to know that and respect it. DPAC still requiring masking indoors because it is still an important strategy for crowded indoor spaces. We've just invested in high-quality masks for our staff. Many churches still masking indoors and as a way to show care and compassion and a sense of health equity for the most vulnerable among us. So I know we're going to do this together. I look forward to setting local metrics like Philadelphia has that clearly communicate to Durham, if we get another surge, here's when we'll pull the mask back out. But we do it together, and we do it, and this board has always done this unanimously. So I look forward to continuing these discussions as we work forward hand in hand with, I cannot thank them enough, our amazing nursing staff that has led us through this, has made so many calls to families who has had to, masking has helped prevent classroom closures in this district and helped keep students in school. So hang in with us a little bit longer, and we look forward to making progress together. Thank you.
Mrs. Lewis?
This is certainly an important conversation to have, and I am thankful that it was added to the agenda so we could have this discussion and see where we're standing with the changes that have been made in the city, with the metrics that have changed as well. And we know that masking has made a difference in preventing the spread of this virus. So, you know, we want to make sure we continue to listen to the science. We want to make sure that we're continuing to also address the needs of those, as Mr. Raven brought up, those who have speech therapy. And what I have seen in our schools already is a translucent mask. And if we can get more of those, if there's any need in any of our schools, because I don't think we're ready to get rid of the mask mandate at this point. I also like to see what things look like after spring break to get to that point. But as parents have expressed a need right now, you know, I want to hear make sure it's a concrete need, because like I said, I've seen the translucent mask in the schools, in the younger classrooms, and those who are doing speech therapy. So if that's not something that your child has and you want to make sure that's asked for, let's make sure that's happening. Let's make sure that the families have that information as we're looking at hanging on just a little bit longer. And also, as we know, there's less transmission outside. And I thank you for the recommendation, Dr. Hardy, team, administration. I'm definitely supportive of it. I also like what Mr. Sear said. Give our families a chance to make some decisions on talking to their kids about it. It's still optional. The biggest thing I think about with the younger kids, you know, how many hats and gloves do we have in Lost and Found? So with kids taking off masks, we're gonna have, well, where'd that mask go? So I just think that there's a little prep time for our families to prepare their children and students would also be helpful as well. Thank you for the conversation, Board.
Any others? Yeah, so I have a few comments on this. I want to make sure that something that we hear quite a bit in some of our emails and comments and calls is about our authority in the school buildings to make mandates. The state, county, and city don't have the authority to overwrite what we do in our school buildings. We're an elected board to manage the school buildings themselves. So the loss of mandates on the state, county, and city levels have no impact on the decision that we make as a school board. Just wanted to make that clear. As my fellow board members alluded, we've got a lot of communication, as you can expect, on a topic such as this. And some cordial, some not so cordial. And that's fine. That's what we are. That's what we as elected officials, what we expect. But the thing that really sticks out to me is this idea that everyone is talking about, everyone who is interested in the reduction, the option for masks, the change of the decision to be optional, for a mask to be optional. All of a sudden now they're citing the CDC. CDC says. But just a little further in that CDC recommendation is a recommendation for all people 5 years old and older to be vaccinated. For some reason, that gets left out of the comment. That gets left out. The CDC said, follow the CDC recommendations. Well, did you follow the CDC recommendations to get your children and yourself vaccinated? Can we get to a place in Durham where we're 90% vaccinated across the board? Because that's what the CDC says for herd immunity. It needs to be over 90%. See, another thing that gets left off in a lot of these comments, and I feel comfortable saying this because I'm a devout Christian, and you see, God's going to take care of me. We don't talk about it because God's going to take care of me. But I think is what James 2:17 that says, faith without works is death. See, you can pray and drive on 85 with your eyes closed, but you're probably not going to survive that. You have to work to keep your vehicle in your lane. You have to work to keep you and your community safe. We have people who have studied infectious diseases their entire lives, well, professional lives. And people see one part of a recommendation and now they're experts on what the whole district needs. See, we don't have that ability. We don't have that luxury to only think about those in our house, in our own homes. We have to think about the just about 32,000 students and their associated families and contacts when we make these decisions. So to those who, for some reason, believe that we don't care about the children, we don't care about children in our schools, we don't listen to parents, you're wrong. Because see, you have the luxury of saying, well, I want my child to do this or not to do this. We don't have that luxury. We have to make decisions that affect a large system. And so recently we've been getting a lot of emails with the statistics that are sent out from Durham Public Schools with a lot of zeros. And I appreciate that, because what you're doing is validating the mitigating decisions that we make in our school system that they're actually working. So I appreciate you all continuing to send that, because that makes me proud that what we're doing is the right thing. There are passions on both sides, as you hear in public comment. People want to keep the mask, people want the options. And that's what we are as a community. There's never going to be one decision that we make that goes, that makes everyone happy. But those things being said, I do believe at some point we will be at a place where masks can be optional, and that could even be this school year. Me personally, I'll be okay with tomorrow if we were to say mask off outside. I'll be okay with that. I know that there's decisions to be made on how we're going to do that, but I'll be okay with that. But my place for making mask optional, throughout our school system or whatever it may be, is 2 weeks after spring break. That's where I'm landing. Because regardless of what you feel about, if you care about transmitting COVID to other people, you care or not, that's on you. But people are going to be going to the beach. People are going to be going out. People are going to be in restaurants and crowded places because of spring break. And what's going to happen is going to come back. And we're going to see naturally, because this has happened every single time, some like a break, we see an uptick in cases. And so because of that, because we have people who are writing us that, one, they want to stop testing. They've already said they wanted to stop reporting. They're against vaccinations. Now they're against masks. Essentially, they want to forget the conversation. We've even had someone tell us, we don't talk about that at home. We don't talk about COVID at home. And it's wonderful. But we don't have that option to not talk about COVID and consider COVID. So with all of these things in place, now what we're seeing is people want us to allow people in school. You don't have to report if you're sick or not. You don't even have to test. You don't have to you can't ask anybody about vaccinations. Here's a caveat. You had to do vaccinations to get into school, but that's a different conversation. Your whole life, everybody had to do vaccinations, but you don't want to do that. So it doesn't matter if you're sick or not, or asymptomatic, you may have it, you can spread it, and that person may not be asymptomatic, but you don't care about that. It doesn't matter. You don't want any of that. Well, we don't have that ability, and we don't have that. I don't believe this board has that desire to ignore COVID like some want us to. We don't have that. I hope we don't. So if we're making a recommendation, I would be okay with us taking the mask off, optional outside. You can have them off outside. Within the schools, I'm not ready yet to make it optional. I'd be willing to revisit that conversation 2 weeks after spring break, after everybody comes back. Things settled, we see who's sick, who's not, see how it works, if it's really that. Because remember, these home tests have reduced people's reporting if they've tested. And some people just don't report it in general. Right? So I want to make sure we have some time after a large event, spring break, to come back, make sure our numbers are down, and I would consider optional testing. Thank you. So go ahead.
I want to add a couple things. I really appreciate all of our comments in this conversation today. I think language matters. So I like the idea of mask recommended whenever we got to that point. And I also think there's a conversation around what mitigation strategies, if we were to move there, would be in place. I think a thing that concerns me around this is how do we make if there's not universal masking and there is exposure, like how many students and how many staff could potentially be involved in having to quarantine, and what might that look like when it comes to staying open for in-person learning? So I would just want us to be considering mitigation strategies, how we would contact trace and do something to make sure that we could keep, if there was a positive case, not have it impact a whole school, a whole building. And then I also agree with Ms. Byer talking about metrics for when, if we get there, that they would return. I do support being mask recommended or mask optional outside. I think that's a smart recommendation. It's warming up. We know that transmission is lower when you're outside, so I appreciate that. But I think those are a couple of things I want to add to the conversation that we need to consider as we're making this decision.
Yeah, I also appreciate those points, Chair Umstead. I I think about our pre-K students and what our recommendations are going to be for keeping them safe. I think about, and maybe this is work with Barrington Smith, but if we have an immunocompromised teacher who we love and cherish as a member of the DPS family, could a class be made mask mandatory in order to keep that beloved teacher safe, right? What ways do we have to set policy to protect each other in a more individualistic basis as we go forward? If we have a student that is, immunocompromised and needs that care, is that, something that we can set as a board going forward? There's just nuance to this conversation that I think our staff need to help us wrestle with and message it going forward. I hear so many folks saying Duke dropped their mask mandate, not for indoor classrooms. Duke has a mask mandate, still has mandatory testing as far as I know, or at least lots of testing. And particularly watching that spring break metrics, I think is going to be super, super important. But thank you all for engaging in just a thoughtful conversation. Ms. Valladares, I see you've got stuff to add. I didn't mean to jump in there over you.
No worries. I just, again, I just want to reiterate that we are having these conversations, and I appreciate our board chair also being very intentional. And, I just know those one-on-ones are very important as well, because we're hearing from all the community. It's a vast community. We think about over 30,000 students. We think about over 5,000 staff members. I mean, our workforce, we think about, volunteers, who we approved could come in, and there's some schools who definitely have discretion as to, the amount of volunteers, but we have been moving towards that. This is all predicated on checking the pulse, and we are checking the pulse. And I just want to let everybody know that we will continue to check the pulse. We do hear you, and we are having these conversations. And I think that at least from our discussion tonight, everybody knows that we are moving towards that there's a willingness to consider a difference between indoors versus outdoors, and to consider what does it mean to support children in the ways that we can, and buying more masks and providing, more resources, and offering and being able to have mitigation strategies in place. And so just wanted to add that it's a very important discussion. And it seems like we are also we are looking at what is happening right now, and we're looking at projections as well. And so it seems like there is a moment for us to also continue to hear and gather more feedback as well.
Mr. Raven.
So it looks like we have, I guess, I'd like to kind of separate it, because it seems like there's two motions that could be out there. And the first one, would it be a recommendation to go with the recommended masking outdoors? I guess it seemed like everybody was comfortable with next week, which is like March 14th.
I think that motion would be to support the administration's decision and what they laid out earlier around outdoors, as well as the sports capacity. It was several things listed there. So I think the motion would be to support the administration in that decision.
So I move to support the administration and the recommended masking and the other items that they have outlined for outdoor mask
The new
usage.
COVID-19 protections.
I would like to hear from the board about a specific date. Next week, when? Can we do this on Wednesday, next week?
That's okay with me. I see some head nods.
Effective Wednesday next week?
Is that, yep. I'm seeing thumbs up. Wednesday, okay. Wednesday would be, what date is that? 16th. 16th, okay.
The motion that was made was limited to, if you could restate the motion to be clear what it includes, because as it was stated, it just included the outdoor masking.
So the recommendation, the motion was to support the administration efforts regarding recommended masking outside, as well as other, I guess, safety procedures they have in place as of March 16th.
Is that the additional safety measures, is that in regard to outdoor masking?
Like athletic events and stuff like that. They spoke about it a little bit earlier. Can we just say we vote to support the administration's recommendations?
How about
and
you vote
blanket?
to adopt
Adopt?
their recommendations
Okay.
as presented?
I move to adopt the administration's recommendations as presented to begin on March 16th.
Been moved and properly seconded that we adopt the administration's recommendations effective March 16th, 2022. Any further discussion?
No, I appreciate the administration listening to that feedback, bringing that, being prepared with that, and being responsive to our community. You've also been responsive on issues about speech that we've been sharing as we've heard from families and stuff. So y'all are always constantly working on stuff, and I really appreciate your leadership on this. You all implement these things. And the only reason this board votes on this is because the General Assembly passed a law that made us put this politically in front of folks every month. And there it is. But thank you so much for your work behind the scenes on this.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion? There is a motion on the floor. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, please use the same sign. Passes unanimously. Is there a second motion?
So as of right now, and it seems like the rest of the board acknowledges that we are moving closer to being able to go without a mask, but we're not there yet. So on that one, this would be a recommendation, and this relieves us of having to vote again at the end of the month. But for March, it's already taken care of. So I recommend that we renew the mask mandate, and we can review it again next month.
24.
Yeah, we normally do this at our regular board meeting. And I think it will be important actually to wait to have an understanding of what community would like to see. This wasn't on our agenda today, so we know we got some messages from folks, but we know that people maybe would not have been prepared for a decision. So I'd rather us wait into our March 24th meeting to have that vote again, and then we can decide what we need to do moving forward.
Are you okay to withdraw the motion?
Withdrawn.
All right. Is there any other discussion? All right. The last item on our agenda is the summary of follow-up items.
Thank you, Chair Lee. A couple of items that we talked about today. Make sure that all schools use the proper language and share information about McKinney-Vento with families through websites and web links, et cetera. The changes to the associated policies that we discussed tonight will be placed for consent on and second reading at the March 24th board meeting. Just a reminder that the DPS Community Fun Fair event will be held on March 19th from 1 to 6 at Durham Central Park. Please come out and support our amazingly talented students. And then stay tuned for the Durham Values video specifically developed to recruit talent to the district, and continue to work on developing a school to career pipeline for our students to work in DPS.
Okay, thank you. I will now accept the motion to go into closed session for the reasons stated on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded, and we go into closed session for the reasons stated on the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please use same sign. We are now in closed session.
We are now back in open session. Dr. Mabinga.
Madam Chair, I'm here to seek for your approval for the personnel report as discussed at the closed session.
Move approval of the personnel report as presented.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the personnel report dated March 10th, 2020. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please use the same sign. It passes unanimously. And with that, we are adjourned.